Hello, everyone. Welcome to the South American game. This is a podcast that I want to start, and I'm not sure if I'm gonna make it a weekly thing because I could turn into a Libertadores Sudamericana podcast and do a sort of weekly podcast about that. But this particular one, this pilot, is gonna be it's gonna be a special one because we're gonna talk about all the leagues previews, some of the relegation favorites, some of the candidates to win the league, and some of the revelations so far or potential standouts for leagues that haven't started yet, like Uruguay or Brazil, for example. So, to sum this up, we're gonna talk about every single league in South America. We'll talk about all the 10 countries plus Mexico. I'll explain why we're doing Mexico once we get to that section. But we're gonna include Mexico, and we're gonna. I hope you enjoy this podcast. I'm your host Brian Birdie. That's my name, and we're going to start this podcast with that. We're gonna start with Peru, which is the one I know the most. Now, if you're listening to this on YouTube, there should be timestamps. So if you don't want to listen to the whole thing, you can just click on a certain country. And that should make your life easier. If you're listening on SoundCloud, I'm not sure if there is timestamps on there. I'll find something. But if there's nothing, then you're gonna have to find it yourself. But on YouTube there should be timestamps on the ones I put. So I look forward to this, and let the show begin. We're gonna start with Peru. Let's go. And here we go, the Peruvian section. I've got Renato Birches here. Of course, it was always possible doing this with any one of my Peruvian Walls crew, even myself, but I definitely wanted someone alongside, so I got Renato with me, who is definitely one of the best options out there. How are you, Renato?
I'm doing fine. I'm really excited to talk about some Liga One action, everything about the league, and like you, I just like talking about Peruvian football.
All right, so now it's been 3 match days. Two for some because there's been a few COVID issues and a few scheduling problems, especially with Ayacucho, and the incorporation of Alianza Lima, which I think we're not going to talk about this time. We might talk about Alianza Lima in general, but I don't think we'll talk about the reincorporation. Like, we've heard it to death already. We know what it's all about.
I know it's all complicated.
So, Renato, even though you are a Cristal fan, and we know who you're gonna say who are the favorites. Besides Cristal, because I think for most of us, Cristal is the favorite to win this league. Would you pick two other candidates to have a go here?
Well, I mean, of course, since known as I am the Cristal fan, I would of course say Cristal are the favorites. But if you look beyond them, I would have to say it could either be a battle between UCB or Cienciano. I say Cienciano because they have like they added like a lot of new interesting players. My boy Jordan Givin, who I really loved. He was at Martin. My former Cristal player Kevin Sandoval, whose recent performance is starting to like make me question if Cristal could eventually regret letting him go to Cenciano. They also got their midfield still. They got Ariesa, who is just fantastic. And I think with the reinforcements, I think they can like at least push out to go into the playoffs at the end of the year. And also, I think with UCV, now unfortunately, they really did not do well in the Libertadores against Caracas. I feel like they were
Yeah,
Chemo really had a poor game
they
plan,
they
but
dropped the ball there for sure.
yeah, unfortunately, but if I could say one thing, I think they still have everything to compete for this year.
Yeah,
For one
Vallejo
thing,
would be my second favorite here. And go on, Renato. Sorry for interrupting you.
yeah, it's alright. So, for one thing, they do have like they kept most of the squad. They have let's see, they have the midfielders, and also like they also have like some interesting young players, especially Francesco Flores, who scored 2 goals. I think it was against Municipal. Yeah, it was against Municipal. I think he could be like someone that could like attract a lot of attention in throughout like Peruvian football. I also do think that Sebastian Pinau, on loan from Alianza Lima, he seems to be another interesting youngster. I also am liking what I'm seeing from Euros Mena, who I think started at one. I think he was the top scorer in the league last year.
No,
Correct me
no,
if
no.
I'm
It
wrong.
was Herrera, but he was second.
All
I'm
right.
pretty sure.
But yes, Mena is still showing that he still got it. And I even with that squad Usabe has, and if Chemo continues to be at least on point with his game plan, I do think they have everything to make it to the playoffs.
Yeah, Vallejo are a firm option for me. The third, I'm not sure who I would say, to be honest. I'm like looking at the table. I thought I had the third clearly in my mind, but I'm not entirely sure. I wouldn't say Melgar. Like Melgar will fight for the playoffs, but I'm not. I still think they're a few pieces away from fighting for the title. Cinciano will when they have clicked this season, they've looked really good, and yeah, like you said, Sandoval has been really good. He's been shining for Cinciano since arriving there. But I'm not entirely sure if all convinced of them yet. Of course, it is very early, and they have a good squad. They have one of the best midfielders in the league, so they'll definitely be in with a shot once, assuming they click even more. Right now, as of this recording, which is April 10th, which is the time we're recording this. This is the first part of the podcast we're recording. My third favorite would be Huancayo because Huancayo has just been very
Yes,
solid, kept a very strong base, and Yuya's
totally
just getting
agree.
better every season. So
Yeah, that I would probably ask a third option. I mean, for what they are, like maybe they might not look like the most attractive squad wise, but something about them shows you that they put a lot of effort. And I
they're
also
well
think
worked.
I also think their manager, I think his name is Wilmar Valencia. He knows
He's
how to manage that side.
yeah, he's turned things around because I used to think he was a terrible manager, but when he joined Huancayo, he's really changed. Actually, when he joined Atletico Grau, he changed my mind. But like he's been gradually growing and he's gotten better as a manager. I can definitely I admit
Absolutely.
that. And Huancayo, the best center back in the league, and Jimmy Baloyes, which can't go unnoted. So
Oh, absolutely.
that's
And they also
definitely
got Joel Pinto as well, an amazing goalkeeper, even at almost 40 years old.
yeah, he's aged very well, like a fine wine. Anyways, next we're going to talk about the relegation candidates. You said this was an easy one for you. I'm not entirely sure it's so easy for me. My candidates right now, and of course, as of this recording, this is due to change. Maybe even next week when I hope to upload this podcast. Binacional is a firm favorite to go down for me. Second, UTC maybe. And third, even though I hate admitting because they're my squad in Peru, Alianza Atletico, the squad, there's some of the players they've signed just aren't like they signed all of Alianza's core from
They
last year.
signed Carlos Asquez. That's a horrible signing if you're gonna ask me.
I actually think Asquez is the least worst of the signings. I think Cruzado and Mudo were worse signings to be
Oh,
honest.
that's true.
So, but Asquez is definitely not a good signing either, unless
He's gonna
he's
bring a
off
bad
the crush.
attitude to the
Yeah,
to the locker room, fortunately.
yeah, I think those are my three favorites. It's kind of hard to say. Honestly, I think the relegation race is going to be a little bit tight this year. But the three worst teams for me so far are Alianza Atletico, UTC, and Binacional, without a doubt. What about you?
Absolutely. If I have to say something on Binacional first, yeah, it's no surprise to see how they have badly fallen since that 2019 league win, which in their defense, they did deserve that win since they had like Mosquera and the players, but
They also had
as
players
with every
like
provincial team,
Kambu and Mian, who were the best players in that league that year.
oh, absolutely. But as with every provincial team that kind of just overachieves, they just lose everything,
Yeah,
unfortunately. And they had to get humiliated last year in the Libertadores.
it's not sustainable
And
at all.
oh, it's
So yeah,
not. And I don't think I'm pretty sure like almost like half of their players from the 2019 are not even there anymore. And that team is just surviving. So don't be surprised if they unfortunately get relegated this year.
what about the other two candidates? Okay, I should mention before we go on, and this is my fault for not mentioning earlier, that two go down automatically, and the third bottom goes to a playoff. I've understood it. It's been a little bit of a mishmash in the format, but like it always is. But this year the relegation format's a little bit different than most years, anyways. Even with that, so who will be the other two favorites to go down?
I would say Alianza Atletico because, as you mentioned, the recruitments have, at least from the impressions, they've been bad. I mean, I don't do not understand how you can, in what mind you want to hire possibly three bad players from Alianza's horrible season like Alianza Lima's horrible seasons. Carlos Asquez, Cruzado, and an injury and now unreliable Muro. So I really don't know how you're gonna survive with that, but that's what makes you pick the second choice. But for the third choice, it's really tough to say. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
I
hard.
would say Cantolao actually, if it
That's
weren't for like Aaron and Celi, but
yeah.
even then,
If they lose Selly mid-year, I think Cantolao are a very good shout.
oh, they are. I mean, they're basically relying on Celi and for his like for survival.
Another candidate could be Ayacucho. I know they won their first match and drew their second, but I don't know. I feel like the defense is like if they choose to play Beltran and Salazar, they're gonna struggle this year.
Oh,
But
they will.
they definitely do have a lot more work rate than Binacional has at any point. Just
Yeah, absolutely.
any team that loses
Absolutely.
so badly in the Libertadores like they did,
Yeah,
usually that's usually not a good representation of the league. It's not a good representation of the team instead. Because
yeah,
like
that
you see other teams like La U and Cristal, they don't get many. Well, not so much Cristal, but La U, Alianza, they don't get many points, but they don't get humiliated either. Like their humiliation is more on the scoreboard and the number they got, not the scoreboard, but the numbers of points they got, rather than losing 6-0 every game.
yes. If I had to say something on Ayacucho, it's kind of like Binacional now of 2019 to 2020. So Ayacucho, they almost won. They were near to the final of the league. They had a good squad, but as you know, they lose it, and unfortunately, that's where things affected them in the Libertadores against Gremio. And Gremio went even with a B squad, they went full on out, and fortunately, Ayacucho just couldn't deal with it. Even though I don't think those two legs are a good representation of Peruvian teams in the Libertadores, but some people will think otherwise, unfortunately. But even then, I do think they can try to be like near to as relegation candidates because they've also did some poor recruitment, especially with hiring Carlos Beltran and Aldair Salazar, which those were possibly two Alianza's worst players from last year. So if you really think you're gonna survive with them, then I wish you the best of luck, but that's a long shot.
I think Roberto Villamarin should play instead of Salazar myself. But anyways, that's a good transition actually to the last bit of this Peru section, and we're going to talk about some of the talents that could break out potentially, or some of not the talent that could break out. Better said, some of the players that has been playing well this season so far. So. First, I'm going to talk about Jefferson Farfan, who I want to
Oh,
clarify
that's
that
something to bring up as well. Jefferson, he's now back.
he's definitely going to be a lot better than Vargas. Just those 20-ish minutes he played the other day against Municipal, they were way better than any of Vargas' games ever at La U. Like Vargas scored in his first game in his Liga Uno debut or Descentralizado debut back in I want to say 2017, 20 no, it was 2017, yeah. He scored in his first game against Huancayo, but it was a bit of a fluky free kick, and he didn't do anything in the rest of the game. Farfan scored and actually did look dangerous. So I think Farfan is definitely going to be a great signing. The risk comes from injuries, but other than that, like if he stays fit, he's an easy 20 goals for Alianza Lima. What do you think, Renato?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of Alianza getting back into Liga One, it was kind of a messed up some situation. But if you look beyond that, now even though they just got back from a bad season, I think Jefferson Farfan will be the player that they need at least to get their fighting spirit back. And at least you know with Farfan that he will do anything for his beloved Alianza, and I can guarantee you that he will perform unlike so much than what Vargas did at La U. And the score he just did like I think a few days ago as of this recording. I think there's gonna be more of that.
I think one of the problems with Vargas is specifically at La U is that they couldn't find an ideal position for him. At least with Farfan, you know he was going to play as a 10. Or not as a
Oh,
10, not as a
absolutely.
10, as a 9, sorry. But Vargas, they play him in midfield. They try him at center back. They try him at left back, and
It was terrible.
he was never a center mid in his career at any point. He was a strong left back and left wing that would eat up the side of the pitch, but he he was nothing like Trauco, who was a technical. Well, he was. I'm not saying he wasn't technical because he was, but like he wasn't like fully all on technique. He was more about stamina and making strong and quick runs into to the final third. But
Yes.
obviously his weight didn't help that a lot by his time. It was definitely an exciting moment to see him come back, but it just didn't work out. But I'm confident Farfan's going to be the complete opposite to that. I know he's going to do well here. Now,
Oh, he will.
as for other players, looking at the goal scoring sheet, we can talk about Feluccio all day because he's probably been arguably the best. I say the two best players in the league so far in these first 3 match days have been Feluccio and Yuya. But I also want to give a shout to some of Vallejos' talent like Jorlis Mena and Francisco Flores, who I think are going to be great this year. Jorlis Mena is nothing new. Francisco Flores will be a revelation because not many people know of his
Oh, he
existence
will.
yet.
He reminds me of Papu Gomez a bit.
And Luis Iberico is another name. Like he was a
Yes.
great player in the under 15s. Then for the next 5 years he just disappeared. Like he didn't develop at all. And he seems to have finally found his footing. He's a bit of a late bloomer. I don't think he's ever going to play abroad. If he does, it's going to be like a small team like Puebla or something like that. But I don't think he's going to ever make it abroad. But he'll definitely be one of the better players in the Peruvian league. Kind of like I want to compare him to Avila in some ways, even though they're kind of different players. But I want to like compare him like career wise. I can kind of see him taking an Avila route. Maybe try a stint abroad, not do so well, and come back and be a key player for one of their teams at home. So I can kind of see that. What do you think?
If I have to say some quote unquote revelations or like U23s in general that are breaking out in the league, as you mentioned, Francisco Flores is one, but speaking as a Cristal fan, now unfortunately with Cristal, Gianfranco Chavez is expected to be out until like the end of the month, which is bad news for them. But there's a new defender that's already stepping up right
Gilman
now.
Lora, I can read your
Yes,
mind.
yes.
He's a great
He's
player. I saw
been
him.
a revelation.
Yeah, I saw him in the
What
under
I
20
like about
Libertadores, and I liked him both as a center back and a left or right back. But right back is definitely his ideal position. He's more offensive, if anything.
Yeah, so if I have to describe Laura and how I what I like about him, of course, like his stamina and also like just his offensive game, it's something that just like it adds a lot of support to the right side of Cristal's attack, and they just look dangerous every time he's going forward. But also, like even though he might not look like the most physical player in the like right now, it's like he's only 5'7", but he's very good defensively. In fact, I think at one game, I think it was against. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he won like almost all of his ground duels, which is something I was impressed about. And even Mosquera would even call him like speak highly of him and even nickname him La Realidad. So I do think he has a chance to be Cristal's starting right back for the Libertadores, and I think at this point he has already dethroned Johan Madrid from the right back position and already Percy Prado before arrival.
Yeah, the Percy Pedal thing, we can rant on it all
It
day,
was a
but
myth.
we're not going to talk about it here, especially because we have little time. There was one more thing I wanted to mention. Let me just try to remember quickly. Basically, I think that yeah. So let's sum it up quickly. We think that Cristal is going to win the league. Both of us do. And honestly,
Yes.
many people who follow the league, unless you're Alianza and La U fans, who obviously believe in their teams, and maybe Melgar as well, who also have a solid fan base. But most people, and I'm not trying to generalize or anything, but I think most people would agree that Cristal are the favorites to win the league this year again, which is kind of rare. They usually win every 2 years, not 2 years in a row. But I think this year is going to be different because they've actually got the core of their squad. They lost their best player, but like they replaced him all right. Like I think Riquelme had a rough start, but I think he's going to
He'll become a good
I
player
think he's going to grow
eventually.
into a good player for sure. And yeah, my second favorites are Vallejo, third favorite is Huancayo, Renato Cinciano's third favorite, and I said Alianza Atlético Binacional are the two favorites to get relegated. Renato said instead of UTC,
Cantolao.
he said Cantolao. Yeah, instead of UTC, he said Cantolao. And yeah, I don't think there's anything else we need to talk about here. So we will move on to the next section here. And yeah, thank you, Renato. What's your Twitter handle?
My Twitter handle is Renato_Sun. Brian, I want to thank you so much for inviting me over to this podcast.
No
I
problem.
always like talking about Peruvian football, and I hope more can be done on this in the future.
No problem. Yeah, we're still deciding if this is going to be kind of a one-off podcast or we're going to do it every month, but we'll talk about that at the end. So, and now we go on to the Colombia section. We are with Simon Edwards. Who else was going to be? I guess Carl Warshuk was available, but I wanted Simon. I wanted Simon here. What's up, Simon?
Yeah, I'm all right. Not too bad. Thanks for the invitation.
No problem. So, this is going to be the second section. At the time of recording, which is April 11th, I got to make sure to say all the times just because this podcast is probably going to go on a week later, assuming I get all the recordings done this week. So if there's any more games in midweek or if this podcast gets delayed, just keep in mind this is recorded April 11th. So the first thing we're going to talk about is I'm looking here at the table and I'm seeing Nacional are first. I've seen your tweets about complaining about Nacional over the past few years, but it seems like they've been a little bit better this year. Would you say that?
Yeah, I mean, they've been, obviously, Osorio at his best is a very, very good manager, but he's been particularly eccentric with Atletico Nacional in the last few years of his time with the club, and he's obviously gone now. With Osorio, they were very, very vulnerable to the counter-attack. Often played with kind of four.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm a Verdolaga fan, and I remember in Osorio's. I don't know if it was his first stint, but between like 2012 and 2014, his teams tend to implode a lot. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think he laid the foundations for Nacional in 2016. So I think he did some good work initially, but it was a 4-2-3-1. It was much more conventional. And in his second reign, he was experimenting a lot with the team. Sometimes it clicked and they scored a load of goals, but they were always vulnerable to losing the ball and being hit on the counter, particularly out wide, which is why Tolima, which is their speciality, they always beat Nacional. And I think that was reflective of the problem they had. They did okay in the league, but had the second highest goals against in the entire league. So they've started to defend. They're looking much more solid. It's not all going perfectly. But I think they've got a good basis. Rovira is an important player at defense midfield. They've got Gerson Mosquera, who I think is one of the best young defenders in the league. Very, very impressive. Strong, mature, athletic, quick central defender, 19 years of age. He's very interesting. So I think they've just got a better balance, a better foundation with the back four playing as a back four. Rovira in front. They've got Palasa, who's a good ball winner. And obviously, Andrade is a very high-quality player. Thomas Angel, the son of Juan Pablo Angel, 18 years old, is starting to get into the team a little bit. He's interesting. Jonathan Alves gives them a good, experienced, kind of athletic option up front. Or they've got Jefferson Duque, who's a bit dividing the fans because he's great in moments, but if that moment doesn't come, he's quite ineffective over 90 minutes. But that said, they're just a more balanced side. And I think given the quality they always have, being fairly organized and fairly solid and fairly defensively effective, then I think the quality shines through. And that's why they're right now at the top of the league in Colombia.
All right, now looking at the other teams, there's Deportivo Cali, Santa Fe, La Equidad, who, I don't know much about. I'm not the biggest expert in Colombian football, but it seems to me like that's a bit of an overachievement. What would you say about that?
Yeah, so La Equidad are a team that always seem to have quite a solid team full of 26, 27-year-olds. They've got a few more experienced players in there. I think the key to their success is a solid side, and I think Alexis Garcia is a very good manager as well. He had times at junior, but he seems to really done well with La Equidad. It's a team that has a little bit of money. They're based in Bogota, but not one of the big popular teams. So they can't buy the superstars, but they can buy the 7, 8 out of 10 kind of Colombian journeyman. And with a good manager, they tend to be in the top half of the league. So right now they've got a good, solid, experienced side and a manager who's getting the best out of them. So they tend to be contenders for the top 8, but obviously they don't have the star big names of some of the other teams up there. Deportivo Cali, obviously some really good young players, always in Cali, and they're always a team to watch. I was just going to say, Andres Colorado, I think, is probably the most interesting player for Cali. He's on loan for Conti. He's a bit of a Patrick Vieira, big central midfielder, 22 years of age, but I think he could be on his way to Europe in the summer. So one to watch there, big, strong, athletic central midfielder, Andres Colorado.
Now, the next, I've actually, going back to Lucky That for a second, I have seen Lucky That. I've only seen them once, and yeah, they seem like a bit of a tactical success team. And I don't know if you would agree with that, Simon, but they look like a bit of a tactical success team that they just get the job done. What would you say?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think they, as I say, they've got a lot of 7 or 8 out of 10. Stalin Motta still there in midfield, pulling the strings. They've got 1 or 2 younger players coming through, but generally they're built around a lot of professional players who've got experience in the league and are kind of in their mid to late prime. So, as long as the setup's right, they tend to be pretty good. Again, a 7 or 8 out of 10. I can't see them winning the league, but they probably deserve to be in or around the top 8.
All right, now the next one, I think I'm gonna skip on Junior on this one. Like, it just seems like classic Junior, doing well and then like just throwing games away. But I'm not too much about the respect. I want to ask about America de Cali rather, and I guess we can like mix these two topics about who do you think, if there's anyone who would sneak in, who do you think it could be? It looks like there's 4 teams that haven't been eliminated yet: Bucaramanga, Pasto, Jaguares, and Medellin. Now, I've seen America de Cali, and they are not good, from what I've seen. They, I noticed that their midfield is just a mess. And I'm watching mostly because my compatriot Aldair Rodriguez plays there, who has been very mixed in Colombia from what I've seen. Some people hate him, some people think he's a fighter. But, for me, America de Cali's problems just stems from that midfield, from what I've seen. What would you say, Simon? Who do you think could sneak in?
Yeah, look, America should be in there on quality alone. It hasn't been working. I think they've been missing. Michael Rangel was kind of the focal point striker. They brought in Rodriguez to come and fill that spot. Obviously, as well, Adrian Ramos has been unavailable for some games, and he's been pretty good. I mean, this is a player who scored a lot of goals in Europe. He hasn't been at that level, but, for the Colombian league, I think, on quality alone, America are better than Medellin and better than Jaguares. Santiago Moreno, I think, is probably their most interesting player.
Yeah, he looked pretty good when I've seen him as well.
Yeah, a 20-year-old winger, right winger, left-footed right winger who cuts inside, has got a lot of pace and quality, but also invention. And then obviously Duvan Vergara on the other wing. Those 2 players alone should be enough to get you in the top 8. Yes. I like Gratol in goal. Andrade in defence is good. They've also got a young central defender who I like, Ortiz. So, I think America I'd be surprised. I think America will put out a good team to get over the line and get in the top 8. Obviously, Libertadores as well is a bit of a distraction, but I think on quality alone, you would expect America to get over the line. Medellin and Jaguares. Jaguares are a bit of a surprise. Medellin, Bolillo in charge. They've got some good young players. But it's a bit of a strange mix. I think he's getting the best out of kind of his older players, but not necessarily bringing through the young talent they have. There's a very interesting winger known as Etu for Medellin, who's a really good quality player. Manuel Cuesta. Yeah, so they've got a few. They've got Edwin Mosquera. They've got Manuel Cuesta. They've got some good young players. But they're still based around the more experienced. Matias Mia who was at La Equidad last season. He's still very important. So they've kind of stabilized Medellin after a difficult end of last year. But I would say America should get in on quality, even if the system isn't quite working to its maximum potential right now.
All right. Now, who do you think are the candidates to get relegated here? Now we can ask. Now you explained the system to me pre-podcast. Just explain it again, how it works.
Yeah, so relegation usually in Colombia is complicated, is calculated over 6 seasons. So it's the points you have over 6 seasons or 3 years. Colombia has 2 seasons a year. So the idea is some teams may lose a lot of players and they may suffer for 1 season, so they shouldn't be punished and sent down to the 2nd division. Basically, the idea is to keep the big teams in the top division. And it generally works. Obviously, America found it very difficult to get back up and it was a struggle to stay up. The system's definitely weighted in favour of keeping the big teams in the top division and making the small teams go back down if they do come up. So when you get promoted, you inherit the points of the teams you replace. That said, it's therefore unsurprising that the two at the bottom are the two teams that last came up, Boyacá Chico and Deportivo Pereira. Boyacá Chico had a game today.
Yeah. I was going to mention that as well. Go on.
Yeah.
I think you should explain it.
Yeah, so basically, at the start of the season, a game between Atlético Nacional and Tolima was delayed because of the high number of COVID cases. So the league sat down with all of the owners and the directors from the clubs and said, look, guys, we need to sort this out. Let's work out some rules. We'll allow you to register youth players, but we need to decide on the rules. And the rules said that if you have 7 players available, you have to play the game. Any less than 7, it gets abandoned. But if you can field what is legally required to finish a football match, then we play the game. Now, obviously, that's not going to happen. Don't worry, but let's just get the rules. Everyone signed up to those rules. Now, the U20 national tournament this year hasn't happened in Colombia. So Aguilar said, well, we'll register the players we have. We've got 29 players. That should be enough. We haven't got a youth team. We've sent all the youth team players home because there's no games being played. So we'll just register our 29 and we'll be fine. 16 COVID cases and 7 injuries later, they turned up for today's game with 7 players. And the league said, well, the rules are the rules, lads. I'm sorry, you got to play.
Peak South American football at its finest.
Exactly. So they made obviously a big fuss about it, and it was obviously it was an absolute mess. They kept it 0-0 until the 60th minute. And then obviously, as you can predict, they actually had 2 shots on goal as well, although they were both from their own half. One was direct from kickoff. So great respect for the 7, and that included a goalkeeper playing central defence, which is proper Sunday league. So great respect for those guys. And then obviously they conceded 1, and that turned into 3, and that turned into 4, and then someone went down injured and said, no, game over. So
it was 3-0, wasn't it? I thought it was not 4-0.
Well, yeah, I think when it got to 3-0, I think someone went down injured and they called the game off. So they had that option throughout the entire game to just go, no, I'm injured, that's it. But I think they were trying to prove a point, and, well, they did it very bravely. So that was actually quite a significant result. Boyacá Chico made hard work of beating 7 players. But they needed the points because they're bang in trouble with at the bottom with Boyacá Chico and Pereira. So they both play next Sunday, and one of those 2 teams will go down. Usually 2 teams are relegated, but because last season was so weird, only 1 team will go down this month, and then 2 teams will go down at the end of the year. Colombia also lost Cúcuta, which is was a top flight team. The owner hadn't been playing the players, so the club eventually. And again, it's just poor ownership, and there's a few other clubs in Colombia suffering from the COVID, but Cúcuta, unsurprisingly, was the first to go. There's been issues with the president not playing players, even when times were good. So they dissolved around the middle of last year, and that means that there's 19 teams in the Colombian top flight. So we'll have a second division team coming up, 1 team going down, and then we'll have 2 more teams going down at the end of the year and 2 more teams going up. So they're going to try and sort it all out over the next 6 months.
Yeah.
But it looks like it will be Pereira or Boyacá Chico going down right now. And there's a second division tournament. So the top 8 have been decided, and there'll be 2 groups of 4. The top 2 will play off, and the winner of that will go straight up. And the loser will go into a end of the year little tournament, which is still to be decided. They'll get a place in that final automatically to get a second chance of going up.
All right.
Colombian football. So
now,
there we go.
Now, before we end this section here, I gotta ask, what players have been doing well? What players have? If there's any revelations? Here I'm looking at Jefferson Duque. He's back at Atlético Nacional. I feel like my childhood is being relived because he was a great player in his initial run. And I'm also seeing, I knew Borja was a junior, but interesting to see some of these players here back again.
Yeah. There's some big names back in the league. Obviously, you may have seen the news of Freddy Guarin, who returned to Millonarios.
I think I did see that. Yeah, I didn't remember it, but I think I did see it.
Yeah, well, if you would remember it. It was a sad state of affairs. He's left Millonarios now for personal reasons. There was lots of rumors flying around, but there was an issue of domestic violence at his parents' house. he was photographed leaving covered in blood. We don't know what happens. There's talk of all kinds of rumors. People have a lot of sympathy for him, but obviously something has gone very wrong with Freddie Guardian and his family, and obviously, hopefully, that is resolved. So Guardian again was a big star who's left Millonarios now. Worked very hard to lose a lot of weight. He arrived very overweight and has lost 13 kilograms to get match fit, and then everything kind of fell apart over there. But in terms of young players, which is what I mean, Duque I think is scoring goals, but there's still questions over his overall contribution now. He's always been a big kind of strong impact player who works very hard, but maybe can't, even at his peak, couldn't necessarily do it consistently for 90 minutes. So he's used in moments and swapped with Alvarez up front. Gerson Mosquera for Nacional, for me, is the best central defender in Colombia. Very, very good. For Millonarios, they've got Emerson Rodriguez, who's a 20-year-old right winger, full of pace, very direct, very tricky. He makes things happen. Not the most polished yet, but a big impact player. For Tolima, Hamilton Campas is still in the league. He's a great player, number 8, box to box, very classy, scores from range, always making things happen. He's very, very interesting. Dita at the back for Junior, I think, is a good central defender. Who else do we have? Snyder Mena for Deportivo Pasto is a player I like a lot. Can play right back, can play right wing. 22, 23. But his defensive and attacking, dribbling, crossing, ball-winning numbers are very, very high. He's a complete right-sided player, amongst the best defensively and the best offensively in Colombia. So one to watch. Jason Guzman is still at Envigado, which is madness because he's playing really, really well.
I'm surprised he was still there when I saw the squads as well.
Yeah. There's been interest in Brazil, serious interest, but his price tag is a little bit too expensive for South American clubs. And he's not quite the ideal fit for European clubs. We'll see what happens. I expect he'll move, but I have said that for 3 years. But he's definitely one of the best players to watch in the league. His quality is incredible. So those are some players that kind of spring to mind immediately. But there's still plenty of good young players coming through. Thomas Angel, as I mentioned as well, is an exciting one to watch. But yeah, so there's plenty of quality. Envigado, John Jada Duran, 16, 17-year-old number 9, who's already got 2 years of first-team football under his belt. He's a bit of Duvan Zapata, big target man. Needs to add some goals, but as with Zapata, I think the goals are going to click at some point, and he'll be a top striker.
All right, well, that's going to do it for the Colombia section. Thank you, Simon. Just let us know what your Twitter handle is before we sign off here.
Yeah, sure. At Simon Edwards SAF on Twitter for any Twitter needs.
And as I mentioned on every podcast I've been on with Simon on, the SAF stands for Sir Alex Ferguson, not Simon. Actually, I don't even know what it stands for. But that's a topic for
South American football.
Oh, okay. No, it stands for Sir Alex Ferguson. We know that. Okay. Well, thank you, Simon. Next to the next bit now. And now we're here in the Argentina segment. We are with Santi Bausa first. How are you, Santi?
Hi, Brian. It's great to be here.
And we're here with, how do I refer to you? Golazo Argentino or Peter Coates? I guess either works. Am I right?
Yeah, either works, yeah. Thanks for having me on, Brian.
No problem. So, the same format as we've done with the others, except the Liga Argentina, or I'm just going to say Argentina. It's easier for English viewers or English listeners. But as you know, the pandemic has really shifted things around the league. Could you quickly explain the format as brief as you can, Peter, how it works, if there are relegations, etc., before we start?
Yeah, I mean, first off, there aren't any relegations. So there's that side of things is eliminated, or the one ordinary complication of having the average relegation table, at least for now. The 26 teams that are in the top flight have been separated into 2 groups of 13, and essentially they play each other once in those groups, except for one additional interzonal Clásico. And the top 4 from each group after those 13 games then go through to the quarterfinals. So it's a straight knockout from there, with the winners of one of the groups playing 4th in the other group, etc. So yeah, that's what we're playing at the moment, and there's 4 fixtures of those zones left.
Okay, so as you mentioned, there's 4 fixtures. First, I guess we gotta talk about some of the favorites here. Now, I'm gonna just butt in. I'm not the most biggest expert in Argentine football. I do watch some of the league at times, but I can't say I know as much as you two. So I'm gonna just apologies if my favorites just aren't favorites at all. But I'm gonna go with Colón, River, and I want to say Lanús as well. I don't want to say Boca because I watch every Boca game and they've been awful. So what would you guys say? I think Colón has. I know Pulga's out with COVID, but I know they've looked very, very good, and just having Pulga will definitely boost them. One of the best players in the league. River have a really good squad. Even if they've always been poor with Gallardo in the league, I think that their squad is just very powerful, and they have looked good from what I've seen. It's just that they're prone to collapse at any time as they have in the past with Gallardo in the league, anyways. And Lanús, I'm pretty impressed with the squad. Same with Boca, really, but Boca, I am not convinced of their manager, which we'll talk about soon, because I know Russo very well. And I'm also not entirely convinced of their squad either. Like, they have a good squad, but I don't think it's as good as the past few years. So let Santi go first. Who are your favorites in the league?
Well, so far I think, it's difficult to say who are the favorites because at this point it looks like it's all very, all the teams are like above. There are some teams that are slightly above average, I think, but there's not a lot, kind of like 2 or 3 like main candidates. I won't use that term, especially given this last match day. About 4 or 5 of the top leagues teams lost. So that means there are like 4 points that separate like 2nd and 9th place. I think one of the zones, but I think the teams have impressed me the most. I think. Out of the ones you mentioned, there's Colón, of course, who have been, as you've been saying, spearheaded by this the cult legend of Argentine football, as is Luis Pulga Rodriguez, who, of course, was dearly missed this weekend when they lost their first game, of course, of the season to River Plate. That's probably one of the main reasons why I think they've been candidates. They have a really, really solid defense to couple with El Pulga's magic on the pitch. There's also, as you said, River. I think they've made some huge reinforcements in the transfer window. They brought about 6 players in, which looks like Gallardo is trying to renovate the squad ahead of some very big moves. For example, Santa Borrea and Montiel, who are expected to leave. Nacho Fernandez, who has already left, and the replacement for the time being, I think. Have been quite solid, especially the likes of Palavecino and Hector Martinez. Santos Borré is still in great form, as well as Gonzalo Montiel, who at this point, I don't know what is he still doing in Argentina. And there are, of course, a couple teams that have really impressed me because of their youth system, how they've integrated youth players in the squad, which are Lanús, one that you've already mentioned, and also Vélez Sarsfield, managed by Mauricio Pellegrino, who is also the leader, I think, of the B zone, if I'm not mistaken, and another team that have, of course, one really, really cracking player in Diego Almada, but also a group of youngsters who have really integrated into the squad and look really promising as well.
Well, before I go to Peter, I have seen Vélez a little bit, and first I gotta say the date of recording. It's April 13th, 2021. Like I did with the others, I completely forgot about that. But it's April 13th. Sorry, I can't numbers. Vélez have looked okay, but I feel like they have a few weak links, and they're not playing as well as they were before, which is kind of funny because with hindsight they didn't win anything, but they were at least much more of a unit. I find in the one now. But I'll let Peter go on. Who are your favorites, and do you agree with any of our picks?
Yeah, I mean, I think your picks pretty much round up the teams that I think we probably would say are contenders. I think, like Santi was saying there, the format this year, I think, kind of makes it difficult anyway for us to sit here and say this team are favourites, because ultimately it's just a case of getting in the top 4, and then we go into a knockout stage where I think what we've seen so far, at least, is most teams look a little vulnerable, and it's one week to the next, you get some surprise results. We talk there about the strength of River or Vélez, for example, but every now and again they look quite ordinary and beatable, and if they have that kind of performance once they're in a knockout stage, then it's all over. So I would pick all those teams that you mentioned. I think Colón and Vélez are the only two at this point that you can kind of look at with 4 games to go with any confidence that they will be in the top 4, because it's all pretty tight otherwise. And the only other team that I kind of want to give a mention to is Banfield, because I think they're one of the teams that have done some of the best work with their youth team, reached the final of the Copa Diego Maradona last time out. And for the last 2 fixtures have basically had to field not even the reserve teams, but sort of under 20, under 17s in some cases to fill up the lineup because of the amount of COVID cases they've had. So they've been hit really badly with that. They lost at the weekend against Rosario Central, having to field a team that was basically without any of its usual starters. But I think when they are able to pick their best team, they've shown already over the last 6 months that they're very competitive. And I think if they can get the players back before the end, then they could make that push into the top 4, and then they would be dangerous in the knockout stage.
Now, do you I guess a transition now that you mentioned who you think would sneak in, we can transition to the next bit with that. What about Zone B? I want to ask about Talleres and Independiente. Now, Independiente was Santi, so if you want to chime in your opinions on that as well, Peter, go ahead. But I want to specifically ask you about Talleres, because Talleres, I've seen them against Boca, and I know Boca probably lost the game on their own, or I don't remember if they lost or they drew, but they didn't win. I know that much. And Talleres,
they lost in the final kick of the game.
That's right. Thank you. And Talleres did look good in that game, even if Boca have been very underwhelming this season. But Talleres won that game well, in my opinion. From the bits I saw, because that was the one Boca game I wasn't able to catch. But they look like they have a decent core, and Talleres the last few years, or since going up really, have been competitive, and they've always had one revelation player. This time it seems to be Baloyes. So Peter, what would you say about Talleres and Independiente?
Yeah, I mean that's what I was saying in terms of it's really tight outside. Maybe Vélez and Colón at the top of each group. So I think Talleres and Independiente are 2 of those teams at the moment just outside the 4 top places, but level on points with Boca, who are in 4th in Zone B. So both teams have shown that when they have all their players fit, they can be dangerous, and I think they can be competitive. I think Teixeira's supporters have probably got more reason to be cheerful than Independiente. But, you know, they're just going to be one of those teams in the mix. As you said, they've always, over the last few years, had a good core, young players. They've still got that. They, lost Thomas Pochettino to Austin in the last window, but still have a very competitive team. And yeah, I think, again, it's that core of young players that you just constantly, every year, seem to be able to pick out a few that you think that are probably going to move on either to one of the grandes in Argentina, or even bigger moves overseas, like Navarro, for example, in central midfield at the moment.
All right, and Santi, what about your other contenders? And tell us a little bit about Independiente, since you're the fan here. Actually, I think Peter's an Independiente fan too, now that I mention it, but I completely forgot about that. Well, that's a little bit awkward. Anyway, just chime in your opinions here.
I mean, it's difficult. It's difficult because, Independiente, at the very least, back before the tournament began, it looked like every single decision made as regards to Independiente lacked any discernible ambition. I think ever since they appointed someone like Julio César Falcione, who is 64 years old, who is known for a style of football that goes absolutely against what every Independiente fan expects from the club, and what every Independiente fan feels what the way Independiente should play. He's a really conservative, counter-attacking, low block kind of manager, and the signings have also been, at least at first, really underwhelming, such as 36-year-old centre back Juan Manuel Insaurralde, who, ironically, has become like one of the best players in the squad at the moment. And ever since they've made a really solid start, even if they didn't score a lot, they seem to be solid defensively. But I think ever since the loss against Vélez Sarsfield, which was kind of like a spoonful of their own medicine, which a game in which Vélez were really, really solid defensively. Centre-back partnership of Luis Abraham, who scored the winner, and Lautaro Gianetti was completely blocking every single chance by Independiente. But ever since then, I think they completely lost the confidence. They look really shaky, especially in dead ball situations, which was particularly the area they Independiente were expected to improve under Falcioni, and they've scored a ton of goals from dead ball situations. Well, right now they've lost a derby against Racing, the interzonal derby, which, to be quite honest, I think was one of the poorest games I've ever seen between these two teams. Neither offered really anything to the table, but Racing eventually won it from a torrid refereeing decision, which was a huge blow for Independiente, which also comes as a double whammy, I think, because they've also been infested with COVID cases. They have about 12 at the moment, including the manager, the assistant manager, and two of the assistant managers, if you include Monzon, Pedro Monzon. Yeah, I mean, Independiente at this point, they look really, really weak and really, really poor. Like the worst possible moments in the championship. They've now fallen from those top four positions, and they look pretty close, but it doesn't really look like they have enough to progress when there's teams ahead of them like Unión and Vélez and even Boca, who look ever so slightly better than them.
All right, now we have like 3-4 minutes left in the podcast. I guess we can talk about some of the standout players here. I'll go first. I'll talk about a little bit about Boca because Boca are one of the giants, and you know I do know a little bit about Boca because I'm a Boca fan, especially in Argentina. So I think with Boca, their main problem is probably their midfield. You know, I'm not a big fan of Campuzano, and some of the youngsters like Capaldo and I think Medina. I think Medina is a midfielder as well. I don't rate them at all, especially Capaldo. I don't think he's very good. The defense is okay, and the attack. You know, this is the only time, maybe the only other year other than 2015 where Tevez has looked like Boca star since coming back. I remember when he came back, he looked worse than at Juve, but he did look one of the better players. And then after, I remember he just ran the bench for the next few years before going to China, coming back, and then doing better. So that's what I think about Boca, and I don't rate Miguel Angel Russo. You know, if you follow me on Twitter, you know all my opinions on Russo. I think he's the only reason he got hired for me is because of Riquelme. I'm guessing that was his favorite manager, besides maybe Bianchi, but Bianchi's retired anyway, so that doesn't really count. And yeah, that's what I think of Boca players. What can you two tell me? I'll let Peter go first. What can you tell me about some of the players? Who's been the standouts, and who's been a revelation, if anyone?
Yeah, I mean, on the Boca subject, I think before injuries, I thought Edwin Cardona was showing to be one of the best individual players in the league, and I think partly in recent weeks, Boca's big problem has been when he's been injured because it just saps any creativity out of the team.
And let me jump in. This weekend he actually did play, and Boca looked great in the first half. In the second half, Russo took Cardona off. I'm not sure if it was precautionary injury, but Boca looked much worse in the second half without Cardona. Yeah. So that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think him just coming back from a few weeks off is probably why he wasn't expected to play 90 minutes. But you're right. I mean, you can see the difference between Cardona on the pitch and Cardona off, which is a concern for Boca. I think in terms of the other individual standouts, we mentioned one already, which would be Fulgo Rodriguez before his positive test, was absolutely brilliant again for Colón, and one of the key reasons why they are where they are. And then I think, you know, when we talk about some of the younger players, I mentioned one before when I was talking about Teixeira with Navarro. I think he's been very good in central midfield. And I think with Vélez, Santi mentioned Thiago Almada as the standout young talent, but another guy that I really like there is Luca Orechano, who has started coming into the first team a lot more and just adds a great deal to the attack. Always positive as soon as he gets on the ball. Looks to beat his man, is quick, he can go to the byline, he can come inside on his left foot. He's got a great shot with the left foot, good delivery, and is a really, really promising young player, which has really kicked on in this tournament.
All right, Santi, what about you? What are your opinions on both fronts, I guess?
Well, in terms of the standout players, I think there's one that we haven't mentioned yet and has been in some cracking form for Banfield. I think one of the main reasons they're still fighting, who is Giuliano Galoppo, who has been absolutely electric in front of goal, and once again, it's a big part of Javier Sanguinetti's team, and well, someone who was already shining back in the Copa Maradona, who well is still in some amazing form. And as regards to Boca, I mean, it's always I think difficult to talk about them because I mean it's a team that well you will know it most than anyone else, Brian. But it's a team that almost relishes in chaos, and
Yeah, we were
it
talking
seems
about
like
this before
every
the podcast. Yeah.
exactly it seems like every day something is happening that is shaking completely the foundations, I think, of Boca as a club or within the squad. Something like earth-shattering news, something really shocking happens almost every day. And I think like every player and every manager that goes through Boca has to live with chaos, and there are some players who will be able to relish in that chaos, such as well Cardona and Tevez, and some who won't. Especially when it comes to well Jorman Campuzano and Frank Fabra and some of the youngsters who well Boca with the club that it is really tough to play in there as a youngster, just as Rodrigo Bentancur, who seems like he was absolute trash at Boca, and now that he's out there, he's like one of the best midfielders in Europe at this point. So I mean, it's always a case of how can you relish within that chaos, within that really disjointed squad. But still, Boca still have one of the most talented some of the most talented individuals in Argentine football. So it's always expected for them to be fighting up there despite everything.
All right. Well, that's gonna be the Argentina section. Thank you to you two for joining me. Santi, I wanna get both your Twitter handles. Santi, what's yours first?
It's Bausa99 with S Bausa99. Yeah.
And Peter, what about yours? Do you want to share just your Golazo Twitter or both?
Yeah, no, just Golazo is fine. Golazo Argentino, and that's where everything I do more or less can be found.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so we're going on to the next section now. And next up, we have Paraguay, the Paraguayan segment. First I gotta introduce the person who's with us. We are with Rolf, otherwise known as Paraguay Rolf or Rolf Hanna, whatever you want to call him. How are you, Rolf?
Hey, Brian, I'm good, thank you.
All right, so we're going to discuss Paraguay. So why don't you discuss the format in Paraguay this season? Because it does look a little bit different this year from what I'm looking at. Can you explain it?
Yeah, sure. This season is kind of a reduced Primera, the top division, because of last year's cancellation of the lower leagues with the pandemic. So no teams got promoted to the league this year, but they did relegate the bottom two at the end of 2020. So traditionally we've had 12 teams in Primera for at least, I would say, at least since the late 90s. This year they only have 10 teams in Primera. They're still doing the two short formats in a season. So right now they're playing the Apertura, which is the first short season. Everybody plays each other twice, home and away, and the top in points will be determined champion. And they are the champion of the Apertura.
All right. So
then they repeat the same thing at the end of the year for the Clausura.
Okay. So now with that understood, let's talk about some of the favorites. Now, the Paraguayan League it's one I know very little about. I watched a little bit of it last year, but I haven't seen any of it this year. So it's unlike the other leagues where I have seen a little bit of them. The other leagues we've done so far in this podcast. But today in this one league I'm pretty clueless. So this is gonna be mostly Rolf's floor to take. Now the one thing I want to say before, we're gonna talk about the favorites first. I've always found that the Paraguayan League is a bit like the Portuguese League of South America, where you have 3 teams, 2 decent ones, and the rest are just like way below average. That could be a myth. Maybe you can write that off, Rolf. But I'm looking here. Nacional look to have come back. Nacional always struck me as that second tier side in Paraguay, along with Luqueño, who comes after the big 3. And same with Guarani, actually. Guarani's closer to the big 4, though. The big 3 than they are to the others. But I don't know. How do you agree with any of that? And who would you say are the favorites this year?
Yeah, I agree to some extent. Of the big three has been something that really has appeared in the last 20 years or so with Libertad. Libertad went traditionally a big team, but then with a huge influx of cash at the turn of the century, they've joined kind of Cerro Porteño and Olimpia, who are the traditional big two, and they've kind of dominated the league. Like you mentioned, Nacional had a couple of good seasons. Guarani actually haven't won the league much in the last 20 years, but what they've done is they've been runner up. They've been runner up a lot. So Guarani are definitely fighting with that big three, and Guarani fans themselves would call themselves the third team ahead of Libertad. There's a big rivalry there. But if we go into this year's been really open in terms of the title race. You have Olimpia and Cerro Porteño have been building very well. They won both seasons last year, so Cerro won the Apertura and Olimpia the Clausura, and they've looked very strong as you would expect. Libertad have invested a lot of money. They bought in the Argentinian coach Dani Garnero, who had won a lot of those titles with Olimpia. He's now at Libertad, and they're currently top of the league as we record after 11 games, which is just past the halfway stage. But they're only 1 point ahead of Nacional, and Nacional are playing a very interesting brand of kind of attacking, pressing football under their Uruguayan coach, who's in his first big job, really, which is Rodrigo Lopez, who a lot of people might remember because he scored lots of goals throughout the Sudamericana more than anything, not so much the Libertadores. And then you have one surprise team, Guaireña. Guaireña is, aside from the countryside in Paraguay, which is quite rare to see that in Primera, where most of the teams are based around Asunción. And Guaireña have been, they keep surprising because you keep thinking that at some point they'll slip up. But as, at the moment, although they're in fifth place, they're only 3 points behind the leaders Libertad. And they have a run of games coming up against, they just played Libertad. I think they're playing Cerro and Olimpia quite soon. So in theory, they could be right in among the title if they can keep that run up.
Very nice. Now, I guess I don't have many more questions on the league front. I guess we could ask about relegation. Now, you briefly explained it, I think. I don't remember if you explained it. If you didn't, just explain it here anyways. Maybe I'm just being daft. I don't know. And I'm looking here that River currently the Asunción River Plate are currently the bottom team on the average points table, and second is Sol America in the playoff spot. Now, who would you say are favorites? To me, it looks like 12 de Octubre, and surprisingly, Luqueño seems to be down there as well. Although River Plate seems to be by far the favorite. Looking at that, I've never understood the average points table too well. Why don't you describe it a little bit?
It's a very complicated system. So like you mentioned, the average points is taken over the last 3 seasons. So it's similar to the system Argentina used to have. I'm not sure if they still do.
Yeah, but I think they do. And Mexico used to have it as well.
Yeah. So this always greatly favors, I would say, the teams that have been in the league for at least 3 years, because each individual result now this year doesn't have as much bearing on their position. Whereas you have a team like 12 de Octubre, who have only been in the league for 2 seasons, so in theory, any defeat would actually kind of start to plunge them further down the table. But at the moment, I think you're correct that River Plate are the team that are going to be struggling most. They kind of changed pretty much all their squad going into this season. They lost probably their best player, Ramon Sosa, from last year. He's at Olimpia now, and what they have is a really experienced team. But the problem with this experienced team is they're actually doing quite well in the Sudamericana. So they managed to get into the group stages, so they're going to have that distraction as well.
Who do they play again? Who do they play again? I'm looking here. It's Guaireña, right?
River Plate, they got past Guaireña in the last stage, so now they're into the Sudamericana group stages.
And they're with Huancayo, which I would be very with all due respect to them, but I'm very, very disappointed that Huancayo can't beat them home and away.
Yeah, I would say with River Plate, I mean, they have a couple of good experienced players. You have someone like Pablo Ceballos who scored a lot of goals. He played in the Copa America final back in 2011.
Yeah, the name struck me out. So
and And at the moment, they picked up some results. Although they're bottom, they're actually doing a bit better than they have been recently because of their coach, is someone called Enrique Landaida, who really he spent a lot of his time in the Paraguay national team. Maybe with kind of he was sporting director there. I think he worked a lot with youth teams there. He hasn't had too much experience in Primera, but he did take over Olimpia for a few, I think 4 or 5 games last season as an interim manager, and also did very well there. So that would be their kind of route to safety. But it does look very difficult. And then maybe the surprise is someone like Sol de America, who have been one of the better run clubs in Asunción, but they've really struggled over, I'd say, the last couple of seasons, and it's hard your finger on why. They have been changing coaches very regularly, which doesn't help. This year, I thought they put together a really good team, although they're a bit unlucky that one of their key signings was Osvaldo Martinez, who they brought back from Mexico, where he'd been playing for many years, and he's got injured and he's going to miss all of this season, maybe parts of the Clausura. So that's really affected them. But I think you're looking at River and Sol as the main candidates.
Before we go on to the next little section, which is the players that stood out, which you kind of mentioned a few of them, but I'll ask him a little bit more in-depth analysis. Sportivo Luqueño are quite a big club, maybe the biggest club outside of Asunción, which, by all fairness, Luqueño is Asunción, basically. It's like Callao and Lima. I'm pretty sure that's how it's like anyways. If I'm being ignorant, I apologize. But they're quite a big club, especially because it's the club that saw Chile Verde have his career. Obviously, it's not one of the big 3, maybe not even big 4, but they're a traditional club. What would the reactions be if they go down? Would there be any reaction, or would it just be like, oh no, they went down and they just forget about it? How would it be?
No, this would be a huge, I think. What's the word? I think we'd have a huge reaction from Luqueño as a city. I mean, I think your comparison is like Callao and Lima is good in terms of geographically. They're right next to each other, but they still retain that very important identity. I mean, people from Luque, the city, are very proud of it.
Isn't the airport in Luqueño Asunción's airport? That's what I've heard. Heard something like that. Then it's exactly like Callao and Lima then, because Callao is the same. They're proud of where they're from. And they would swear that Callao is not part of Lima. I mean, they're basically connected.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And in terms of the team, I mean, so what's happened is this year is actually their centenary year. So they're celebrating 100 years. So to go down, in your centenary would be a disaster. They've had like very hard fought presidential elections just over the weekend, where you had the current president held his own kind of alternative assembly, proclaiming himself re-elected, but this wasn't recognized by basically the Electoral Commission. They gave it to the other candidate who did the official elections a day later on Sunday. And actually, you talked about great players like Chilaver. The vice president who's just been elected is Romerito, who played in the 79 Copa America, the 86 World Cup for Paraguay. He was a big star at Fluminense. He played in the precursor to the MLS, the NASL, with Cosmos. And he's one of, along with Chilaver, he's one of the heroes there. I would say on the pitch, they've started to do better in the last 2 or 3 games, which is why they've actually dragged themselves up to 7th place in the Promedio. They were even in that relegation playoff spot for a while. And I think what we'll see now that these elections have happened and some of the off the pitch things are being resolved, they should have enough in the tank to stay up and avoid relegation. But then with this whole system that we have of Promedio, they're still going to be in trouble this time next year.
Yeah, they got to improve with that in mind. And from what I've seen from Luqueño in the past year, which was a pretty long time ago, I was not impressed with them. It feels like they're ruining a bit the loss of Isidro Pita, who went to Olympia, and from the looks of it, neither of them have kicked on since he left. So that's just my observation. Anyway, speaking of Isidro Pita, we can talk about players who have stood out in the league. I think we should let's make this as brief as possible. I think we should talk about some of the the best teams first, the ones at the top, and if there's any revelations, let me know, Rolf. What do you think of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. If you want me to start with the player that's really flying high at the moment, it's Jorge Recalde. He's the leading scorer with 7 goals. He's a player that I think he always did very well at Libertad, where he used to play. But maybe he had some injuries, and maybe with the team around him didn't always work for his style of play. He kind of plays as a second striker. Here at Olympia, where he's moved, I think he's now the top scorer since the beginning of 2020. So not just this season, this has been like a consistent run of form. He often plays behind Roque Santa Cruz, who's injured at the moment, but he does that kind of supporting role very well. And at the moment with Roque injured, he's been leading the line and doing really well. Check him out as well just for his free kick goals. I think he's got 2 now this season, and he's looking very good. And then if you want to look at another, I suppose, more established player who's doing very well in the league at the moment, you have Mauro Boselli, who's...
I had no idea who was there. That's interesting.
Yeah, who I think he even had a spell at Wigan in England.
He's most known for his time in Mexico, I think.
Exactly, yeah. I think with Leon. He was in Brazil. He wasn't doing too well in Brazil, so he's come over to Paraguay. I think he fits Chiqui Arce's system at Cerro very well, in the sense that he's one of those players that if the ball falls to him in the box, he can make something happen. And Cerro are a team that play a lot of possession football and build up, and they like to try and play intricately around the box, and he's very good at that, and he's profited. He has 5 goals so far, and I think I was reading something. He has 5 goals from something like 9 attempts. I mean, he's really been on fire. So there's 2 of the more established players, but if you want, we could talk of a couple of the youngsters.
I think we should talk about a few revelations, especially more than potential. Let's just talk about revelations, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the player that started playing alongside Boselli and Cerro is Robert Morales, who's this kid from place Concepcion in the north of Paraguay in the countryside. When he was very young, when these players are very young and they're from the countryside and they want to kind of make it in football, they have to go towards Asunción. It's the only kind of way. So he went, tried out with Olympia. He was playing at Olympia. He made 1 start for Olympia, senior side, maybe 2 or 3 seasons ago. And then for whatever reason, Olympia didn't decide to keep him on. And Cerro jumped in, saw the potential, and they signed him onto a professional contract. And now he's just been a revelation this season, particularly with 6 goals. And actually what happened was Chiqui Arce wanted to play a system with 1 up front, which was Boselli, and play with kind of 2 wide players. But he kept bringing on Morales, and Morales kept scoring goals. And now he's had to kind of shift his system, I suppose, to more of a 4-4-2 to incorporate 2 players up front, because Morales is doing so well. What he's really good at is his movement off the ball, and he has this habit of finding himself on the edge of the box in space. And so far, he's been finding the net when he gets the ball just outside of the box. So that's helped Cerro a lot in their current run, that you have this guy Boselli, who's a target man, very good in the box, and then you have this kid Morales who's playing kind of just off him and also finding the net.
Go on. Sorry, I didn't know you weren't done.
No, I was just going to say one more player that I really like watching at the moment is a midfielder, Estival Moreira, who's actually in Luqueño. So we're talking about Luqueño not doing so well. But I like this guy Moreira. He plays in the middle. I'm going to say 22, but I'd have to check that. But he's early 20s. And he has this very nice range of passing. He's quite good at recovering the ball, good positional sense. And I think he's an interesting player, being at Luqueño and performing when the team isn't doing as well. I think he's another one to watch.
All right. Well, Luqueño definitely seem to have a lot of young players come through. But that's a subject for another time, I think, because we're out of time. Yeah, because I remember, I don't know if Isidro Pita started there. I guess you can tell me after this, but he was a player I saw early when he was at Luqueño, and he was excellent there. So it's, and obviously Chile already started there years ago, decades ago. So that it's very interesting to know that, or at least observe that. So thank you, Ralph, for your time here. What is your Twitter handle? What can people follow you?
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, my Twitter handle is @ParaguayRalph, so you can find me on there. And I also do an English language podcast on Paraguay, everything Paraguayan football, which is called Guarani Vision.
It's a brilliant show, and it's inspired by what we did with Peru and the Peruvian Waltz. Actually, I don't know if that's true at all, but it's a very and we're any English community, South American football is always welcome. So yeah,
Exactly.
go follow both those accounts, and yeah, on to the next section. Okay, now the next section we have is the Brazilian section. Now, Brazil is a little bit different from the rest of South America because they have state leagues, and that's the league that's going on right now. So the format's going to change a little bit here. We're going to talk about the preview, as always, the favorites, and we're also going to talk about some of the possible revelations, since we've seen them in the state leagues, but the league hasn't actually started yet. So we'll talk about who to watch out for, and yeah, you can choose how to take that as you want. But anyways, before I start, we are recording on April 14th. Like I've done this with every other country we've recorded so far. Just to make sure, if this is uploaded like 6 days from now, is it uploaded from a month from now, which I hope it's not going to be a month from now. This is recorded April 14th, so this is as of this date. Now, we have 2 guests here, just like with Argentina. We have Ewan Marshall, who's in Sao. Actually, both of our guests are in Brazil, but Ewan Marshall's in Sao Paulo himself. How are you?
Hi, yeah, great. How are we doing?
All right, and the other guest we have is Anna Evans, who is, one of them is Scottish, one of them is Welsh. So we have 2 Brits here, but none of them from the main motherland himself. How are you, Anna?
Wicked, thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. So the first thing we're going to talk about, like I said, the format's going to be a little bit different. Let's talk about some of the favorites. Now, the favorites in Brazil seem to always alter. Every single year it's different. Like, I mean, well, okay, I can't say the rest of South America is like that, because that's not true at all. Like South America always has a few favorites, but Brazil seems to always switch between favorites. And I have not seen the state leagues at all this year. I've not even kept up with the transfers in Brazil, which is unlike me most of the time. But I'm going to hazard a guess and say Flamengo is one of the favorites this year, like they have been the last few years, because it seems like they've kept their core and whatnot. And Palmeiras seem to be always consistent as well. But take that with a grain of salt. Let's let the other 2 talk. Anna, who do you think are your favorites this year for the main league season?
Yeah, exactly like you just said. Like, Brazil seems to be impossible to predict. I mean, you can't take a handful of teams and say, these are the lot that are going to run away with it this season. It never seems to be that way. But exactly like you said, I think Flamengo are definitely, I mean, they're always up there, to be honest. I mean, they are back-to-back winners. And they seem to really be going from strength to strength under Rogério Ceni. And so, consistent performers, I would definitely put them up there at the top. But also to look out for Sao Paulo teams, Palmeiras are definitely there. They didn't perform quite as well in the league last year, mainly because they were focusing on other competitions, such as, of course, Libertadores and the Copa do Brasil. But maybe they could, have a threat this year. Sao Paulo as well, Sao Paulo FC. They are definitely contenders. They sort of seemed like they would win it last year. I remember, so this year actually, in January, they were running away with the title. Everybody thought that they would win, and then suddenly just completely dropped off. Didn't win a game in about 2 months, I think. So
Crazy.
exactly, yeah, you can't predict nothing. So they're ones to watch this year as well. They have Hernan Crespo, who of course was formerly of Defensa y Justicia in Argentina. And so I'm really looking forward to see how he will sort of play within the league as well, because he just came in at the start of the Campeonato Paulista. And it's not really a way to measure a manager's talent, really, because especially with the competition in the Brasileirão, it'll really be interesting to see how he deals with that and with the team. So those are my main picks, but of course you have outliers everywhere that could really, really steal the show.
All right, now let's hear your opinions, Ewan. Do you agree with any of that? Do you agree with me as well? What would you say?
Yeah, I think largely so. Something that Anna touched on there was that Sao Paulo last season came reasonably close. It looked like it was their league to win for long periods of the championship, and actually, what the league turned out to be was a championship that no one seemed to want to win. You had several teams who were, just falling by the wayside, had plenty of chances to really open up a proper advantage. I mean, Atletico Mineiro looked really promising at the start. São Paulo, as we mentioned, were basically running away with it at one point. Internacional, in the last day of the season, only had to score one goal against Corinthians, who weren't really playing for much, to win the league, and they couldn't manage it. Flamengo basically won that league by default. They played well, but even they weren't, they didn't even seem that hungry to win the league last year. So you've got this group of sides who, I suppose, if they can reclaim some of that form from last season and go a bit further, develop a bit of consistency, then they can definitely fight. But beyond that, I think we are definitely looking at Flamengo and Palmeiras as being the two front runners. We had at the weekend, we had the Supercopa do Brasil, which is like this kind of brand new tournament that Brazil brought in last year as a cup between the league winners and the Copa do Brasil winners. That was between Flamengo and Palmeiras, and it was just an excellent game. Two sides showing what they can do, different kind of proposals of playing football. Flamengo love to have the ball and move it around and play in the opposition's half, whereas Palmeiras are a lot more kind of reactive, direct, quick, and equally dangerous. And so I think that kind of gave us a preview of what could be the top two sides in Brazil this season. But the one massive question mark that's hanging over all of this is the pandemic situation in Brazil.
Yeah.
It's meant that it has completely disrupted last season. It's disrupted the pre-season. It's disrupted the state championships. How are they going to fit all these games in? How are the players going to be fit enough to make it all the way through a season? These are the really big questions that you have to answer. But if you're looking at just the team itself and the quality, I think Flamengo and Palmeiras are definitely up there.
All right, so it looks like I was right then. All right, what I do want to ask quickly. Actually, no, I was going to ask about Santos, but I don't think we have all the time in the world. I'm just going to assume Santos is going to be a little bit better than last season, especially because of what they achieved in the Libertadores. That's a story for another time. I want to talk about relegation next. Relegation seems a little bit easier to predict in Brazil because there's a lot of big teams in Brazil. There's a lot of competition, but it seems that there's always a few sides that the non-traditional or the less traditional sides, I guess you could say, are the ones that are more relegation favorites. Like I think everyone saw Goiás going down last year. The one that the one thing I noticed in Brazil is there's usually three of the expected teams go down and then one shock. That's what I've noticed, and it happens many years. So last year was Botafogo. 2 years ago was Cruzeiro. So that's what I've noticed. It's a personal observation. Ewan, I'll let you go first. Who do you have as your relegation favorites here?
Well, again, interesting. You mentioned that about there always seems to be a big side which goes down into Serie B, but last year we actually had two, and we had Vasco and Botafogo both going down.
Well, I mean, Vasco's a big side. Vasco's a big side, but they've been yo-yoing for a few years, so I guess it wasn't that surprising for Botafogo.
That's fair, but if you look at the Serie B next season, it's going to be a fat lineup. It might be worth watching because you've got Cruzeiro,
Vasco and Botafogo.
Botafogo, a lot of other traditional sides, Ponte Preta in there as well. It's going to be pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, there are plenty of teams in Brazil which have kind of been on borrowed time in the first division, and I think Botafogo was one of them until they went down this year. I think a big side which will have to be careful is Corinthians in São Paulo. I don't necessarily think they're going to go down, but this is a side which has just basically regressed for the last 3 or 4 years, has not improved.
Yeah, they've looked sloppy in the last few years. I agree with that.
Yeah, and they're under poor management as well, and that's it's one of those declines that, depending on the circumstances, it could get really rough for them. But beyond that, it's it's anyone's game down there.
For sure. And I'll let Anna go next. Do you what if you have Ewan didn't basically give his options. If you have any relegation candidates, why don't you name them? Ewan kind of like mentioned Corinthians, but who else? Do you think there's any firm favorite to go down? Because 4 go down, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that you exactly like with who will win the league. There are no firm favorites for the ones that will go down either. Like you mentioned, Corinthians, they haven't looked good for a long time, sort of not keeping up with the standard that they used to have. But I don't really see them going down, to be honest. There are a few other teams that have consistently also finished at the bottom. Not the team from the northeast of Brazil, such as Sport Recife. I mean, I believe they finished last as well in their group in the Copa do Nordeste that's sort of happening right now. So even sort of within their region, they haven't been performing well this year. I think they barely survived last year as well, going down. So again, one of the teams that on borrowed time would be them. A few other teams, maybe Fortaleza. I mean, they're good when they want to be, but there are quite a few teams that have been sort of floating down at the bottom. And I won't repeat what you just said, the teams that you just said, which I pretty much agree with, to be honest.
Let's discuss here some of the players that are breaking out, revelations, and players you expect to do well next season. First, I do want to ask, Kaiki looks like he's going to be bought by Manchester City. Is he going to play at all this season? Because I think he's 17, is he not? I think he has to wait a little bit before going to Europe.
Yeah, I mean, he's 17 years old and has already sort of signed a pre-deal with Man City. I think for January. I believe he turns 18 this year, but I'm not 100% sure. So I think he will play. Fluminense have qualified for the Libertadores as well, the group stages.
Yeah.
So they'll definitely put him in, I believe. That's as much as I can say.
The team they've got there, Fluminense, because they've brought up quite a few youngsters. They have Mateus Martinelli there as well, who's apparently Arsenal looking at him as he's this kind of holding centre midfielder, quite dynamic, good passing range, and Kaiki just looks fantastic whenever he plays. They could be an interesting side to watch, being back in the Libertadores after a few years. They've got that they've got these young talents coming in, which I think could make them quite interesting to watch. I mean, elsewhere, just look at Santos, for example, or a side who often out of necessity have to play a bunch of incredible young stars, and seem to bring a few more into the first team every single year and sell them off to Europe for huge money. So we could expect something similar from them this season. And I think it's an odd season, I think, that's facing us, mainly because of the kind of pandemic situation and things. Players' development is going to be quite difficult, and as I mentioned at the top of the segment, the fitness factor I think is going to be absolutely huge. I mean, a lot of these young players, if they're brought into the first team and forced to play these massive numbers of games, it's going to be difficult for them to really show their talent when they're absolutely knackered. I
think I'm just gonna chime over their opinion here, because I did see some of Brazil last year. I haven't seen anything this year, like I mentioned at the start of this. But I think we'll see some of the if there's new players that break out, it's gonna be just academy players. I think the established players in Brazil are gonna be just as good this year, like Soteldo, Marinho. I'm assuming he's still at Santos, and some of the Claudinho I've heard is quite good. I haven't seen Bragantino very much, but I heard Claudinho is one of the better players in Brazil this year. So I'm expecting those to shine, especially Claudinho when I get the chance to finally check him out. So before we end this section, I'll let one of you chime in. I'll let Anna go first. What other players do you expect to break out, or do you agree with the established options I listed? And if there's anyone else, why don't you name them?
Yeah, I mean, established players. I don't know, a couple for Sao Paulo, Luciano, I think.
Oh, Nacho Fernandez as well. He signed for Atletico Mineiro.
Fernandez, he moved to Atletico Mineiro. He's a good one to watch. I would say Luciano as well for Sao Paulo. Finished top of the league I think joined top of the league with Claudinho actually for the top scorer. So he's one to watch. Yeah, a couple of young talents maybe. I'm interested in looking at the Internacional in Porto Alegre. They brought in a couple of new players, of young players as well, coming up through their ranks. So they could really challenge as well. But yeah, see what Yuan has to say.
Yeah, go on, Yuan.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we're talking about not necessarily young prospects, but perhaps players who have already been in the league, but perhaps could be set for a big season. I mentioned that the Supercopa final at the weekend, which started in the first couple of minutes with an absolutely gorgeous goal by Rafael Veiga from Palmeiras, midfielder. Veiga has been on Palmeiras' books for years. They brought him in from Curitiba and they loaned him back to Atlético Paranaense, and he kind of, fits and starts for a long time. But last season, he kind of became this kind of irreplaceable figure in their midfield, and he's developed this bizarrely amazing technique, which I don't think, watching Palmeiras for such a long time and watching Veiga for a long time, just didn't really ever think was there. And he's become an absolute linchpin of that team. And that goal at the weekend, you should definitely check it out if you have the opportunity. I think he might be in the running to be one of the real top players in the championship this year.
Okay, thank you to our two guests here. We're going to end off the Brazil section with our Twitter handles. Anna, why don't you go first? What is your Twitter handle?
Twitter is @AnaGoleador. Yeah.
And Yuan, what is yours?
It's just my name, @Ewan Marshall, and that's Ewan with a U, not with a W, because that's the proper.
If you're listening, you probably already knew Yuan because he's probably more famous than anyone on this list, or who's been on here.
Anna would probably protest what I just said. And you spell it with an IW, don't you, in Wales?
The name.
Ewan, yeah.
Yeah, Iwan. Exactly.
All right. Well, we're gonna end that section. So thank you to you two for coming on. Okay, so now we're doing the Mexico segment. As I mentioned at the start of the podcast, we are including Mexico because a lot of South American players play in Mexico anyways, and it's kind of seen as the third big league in the Americas. So I think it's fair to include them, and also I think that the language, not having the barrier there helps, and it's helping a lot of South Americans. So in some ways they can be considered one of us. They used to be in the Libertadores as well. So I'm here with Eugene Rupinski. I think that's how you pronounce it. How are you, Eugene?
Doing well, and you nailed the pronunciation.
Okay, good. So let's talk about the league. Now, the Liga MX is one I do follow. I don't follow it religiously, but I do follow it quite a bit. Now, let me just get to the table here. Cruz Azul is first, but Club America is right behind them. Like, Cruz Azul are on a mad run with my man Juan Reynoso as their manager. But Cruz America is right behind them, and they're on the run themselves. That's been a little bit overshadowed, amazingly. You wouldn't think that it's America, but I guess because Cruz Azul's getting all the attention right now. America is doing just as well. And then behind them in Monterrey and fourth Puebla. Those are the four that qualified the Liguilla automatically. The rest up from 5th to 12th have to play a play-in match. So let's talk about some of the favorites. For me, the two favorites and the only two favorites are Cruz Azul and America, I think. Those two are clearly the best team. We've seen this story with Cruz Azul falling apart in the playoffs all the time. And, they well could do it again. I'm kind of hopeful they'll win it just because I want Reynoso to win the league. But it really is between those two, I think. And Cruz Azul has the test this week against Club America. And before I go on to Eugene, we were recording this on April 14th. So if you listen to a month from now, or if this gets uploaded a week or 2 weeks later, this part's recorded April 14th. So what do you think, Eugene?
So I think you hit the nail on the head. The two biggest clubs and the two hottest clubs right now are Cruz Azul and Club America. Cruz Azul has won 12 straight, which ties the league record. The only two other times that it's been done was once by Leon and once by Necaxa. And when Necaxa did it, it was before the league was professionalized. It was back in like the 1930s. So we're witnessing history right now, which is kind of cool, right? But yeah, definitely Cruz Azul and America are the two top teams. And you're right, America has been overshadowed a little bit by Cruz Azul. simply because all eyes are on them. Like, when are they going to lose? When are they going to lose? And that might put a little bit of a chip on America's shoulder. Like you said, they are going to face off this weekend. I believe it's this Saturday, and they both play in Estadio Azteca. So neither team will really have the home field advantage. So this is going to be a good one. Cruz Azul wants to go out and prove that they can put the Cruz Azuleada behind them, and America is probably going out to rain on their parade a little bit to kind of say, hey, we're still here. We're still the top club in Mexico, and we're kind of insulted that everyone forgot about us so quickly.
Now, I know I'm biased, but and I don't want to turn this whole podcast into just a Juan Reynoso segment, but it's kind of hard to not talk about him when Cruz Azul are doing so well. The one thing I can tell you about Reynoso right now is that Reynoso is a proven winner. Like, whenever you give him a phase in the end stages, the final stages of a tournament, he does win it. Like, he did it with Melgar a few years ago. Lau, he took them to the Libertadores round of 16 and nearly went to the quarterfinals. And that Lau team was disgustingly bad. Like, they had no quality. So he when you put them in a knockout phase like that, he does thrive. But Cruz Azul, I'm sure that's been said at least once in the last 23 years. So I definitely can't speak for whether other managers have had that same little record. So the only thing Reynoso really has in his favor that I know of for sure is that record with the 12 wins, which could put a little bit more pressure on the players. But I think Reynoso himself is a little bit calm and he's trying to fight it. So yeah. The other the last thing I want to say about Reynoso is I want to talk about Club Puebla. Is he Club Puebla or is it something else? I'm just gonna call him Club Puebla. So Puebla are fourth, which is kind of surprising to me because Reynoso did a much poorer job. Not really. He did a good job at Puebla. Puebla fans don't seem happy with what he did, but I think he did a great job at Puebla. And that's not only because of this new manager has taken them to a new level, and I don't think it's just because of Reynoso taking them to Liguilla. I also think it's because of the legacy he left there. Like, he built that team. Omar Fernandez and Santiago Ormeño those were his discoveries. So I definitely gotta give props to him. Now, enough about that. I'll let you give your opinions in a second, Eugene. The disappointments have to be León and Tigres, I think. Tigres, I'm not sure what's going on. Carlos Gonzalez seems to have been a bit of a disappointment. Whenever I see him play, he does create danger, but I don't see him scoring very many. He's on the goal scoring lists. León has been poor, but they did lose a few key elements of the midfield. Like, I don't think it was just Aquino. I think someone else left as well. You can confirm that to me, Eugene.
Yeah, I think León had a tough run of form to start the season. I think, it's always tough coming out of the gate when you're the defending champions, right? Because you've got a giant target on your back. And I think you're right. I think they kind of underperformed at the beginning, but they've kind of turned it around a little bit. I mean, they're in 7th place. There was a time when, they were a lot further down the table, and they've kind of fought and clawed their way back up the table. I think... they're in a position now where they're almost assured to make the repechaje. I mean, obviously nothing's set in stone quite yet. There's still 3 games left to play, but unless something catastrophic happens, there's a good shot that they're in. And once you get into the repechaje, once you get into the liguilla, anything can happen, right? Anything can happen, and I wouldn't surprise me if they kind of continued that hot run of form into the playoffs. I think another disappointment for me would also be Chivas, simply because Chivas is supposed to be the grande. They're supposed to be the yin to America's yang, and they've just not. They've been terrible this year. They've won 2 games. They're stuck down in 15th place. They're most likely not going to make the repechaje. So I think they're another team that has just really disappointed this year.
Yeah, well, Chivas to me disappoint most years, I think. But it seems like this year they've been a little bit extra weak. I guess weaker. I guess you could say it in that way. But they like winning 2 games is pitiful, even for 13 points. It looks like they're relying mostly on draws here. But yeah, Chivas I think did well last Liguilla, or am I thinking of the one before that? Can you confirm that?
I'm trying to think. They've been kind of not great for a while now.
I think it was, yeah, because last Liga was the one that Leon won, and they beat Chivas in the semifinals, if I recall correctly.
That's right. So yeah, Chivas did kind of get hot there for a little bit, but you were always kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? So when we're watching that playoff series, it was like they're not really going to win, are they? And they did, and you're like, wow, okay. And yeah, and when they lost to Leon, it was kind of like, okay, well, we kind of saw that coming.
Well, yeah, with all due respect to Chivas, and I think they should always keep this philosophy because it's a very unique philosophy and it's very nationalist. I really like it. But I think that in modern day, it's very hard to succeed with a philosophy of only what's it called? Only domestic players.
Correct.
The only one I feel that has succeeded with it is Athletic Bilbao, and they're a lot more extreme than Chivas are. Like even El Nacional in Ecuador, they got relegated last year. So like it's just increasingly harder to succeed in the modern day with that philosophy because it's become way more global, the sport. So it's really especially in the Liga MX where there's a lot more money. Like it's like the other teams are reinforcing from everywhere, and Chivas are limited on options. Especially the one bright thing I can say for Chivas is the Liga MX's money. So they're able to get some pretty good Mexicans to join them. Like Pulio joined them for years. Macias is there right now. So I think in general they can get some pretty good Mexicans to join them because they have money. El Nacional in Ecuador didn't have that luxury. So yeah, I think that's one thing I should mention about them.
Yeah, I think the only drawback to that is for Chivas, they usually wind up paying a little bit extra for Mexican players because, if Chivas comes to you, if they come to you for one of your players, you know that they're not gonna go down to Uruguay or Ecuador or something and pick up a player. They have to, by their own design, they have to stay domestic. So you can demand a little bit extra money from them, and that's.
I can see Santiago Ormeño ending up at Chivas one day. To be honest, I think he. It qualifies only if they have the passport, am I right? Or do they have to be like full Mexican?
It used to be full Mexican. I think they've relaxed that. They signed Alejandro Zendejas, who's Mexican American, a while back, and I think they've kind of relaxed the rules now. But I don't know. I mean, Chivas is, who knows what goes on in their mind, right? Especially with the cries for some people to abandon that philosophy.
I would never abandon it, especially without relegation now. Like I don't know if it's gonna last forever, but without relegation, I wouldn't abandon it because it's tradition. It's something that's kind of rare to see in football. So when you succeed with it, because Chivas are gonna win a title realistically every maybe 5-6 years, which is a lot worse than they should be doing, but they still have the grandeza there to be able to do it. They did it with Almeida, and that same squad the next year struggled to get the Liga. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Chivas, what they do is unique, and I think it's good overall for Mexican soccer, for soccer in Mexico, because it gives players who may not otherwise get a shot elsewhere, an opportunity to play. So that is certainly a good thing. I think, as the game opens up, I think you're going to see them exploring other options in ways that still kind of keep true to that. I think, like you said, Ormeño is a guy that's has a Mexican passport, and he might be an option for them. I again with them constantly just kind of underwhelming, and I think they have to be a little bit more creative. But I'm with you. I don't think abandoning that philosophy is. I don't think that's the way to go for them.
For sure. Anyways, I think we have 5 more minutes. Let's talk about some of the players who have impressed. One player, I'm watching a lot of Cruz Azul matches. I don't support Cruz Azul. My team in Mexico is Monarcas Morelia. Anyone who knows me knows that clearly. But Monarcas aren't there anymore, so I can't watch them, and I refuse to support Mazatlan. So I'm watching Cruz Azul now because of Reynoso, and I think the player that's doing best there is the same as always, Jonathan Rodriguez, Cabecita Rodriguez. He's been doing well, and he's the top scorer of the league. So it's he definitely is he? Wait, no. That I'm looking at the aperture. My bad. He's not the top scorer of the league, but he's one of the top scorers. He has 7 goals. He's 2 behind the joint top. So
Yeah.
another player I've also like Puebla's duo, Omar Fernandez and Santiago Ormeño. Omar Fernandez I've followed since he played in Peru, and I knew he deserved to make a jump up, and he's doing well. Although he did sign a new contract with Puebla, which is a little bit disappointing. I kind of wanted to see him take a jump up in Mexico, but at Puebla he is helping them lead into a fourth place, and they're playing a more free philosophy. I think Lacamon is the manager's name, and the other player, and I know I'm biased with the last one, but Pedro Aquino, another player who was, along with Omar Fernandez, the best player in the Peruvian league when he played there, set the bar really high. Like, I don't rate any of the Peruvian young midfielders anymore because he was just so good over there that it was hard to rate them. And now some America fans are making fun of Monterrey for just letting him go like that, which I can rant about that all day, but I'm not going to here. So Angel Mena seems to be doing okay, but I'm not watching Leon too much. So why don't I'll let you discuss the other players that you've seen. What do you think?
Yeah, so I think for me, if we're talking offensively, I think you have to look at Rogelio Funes Mori. He's tied for the league lead in goals with Alexis Canelo and Nico Ibanez of San Luis with 9 goals. And the thing about Funes Mori is that they've played one less game, so they still have a game in hand against a lot of these teams. So he could potentially pull ahead, and I think that's one of the reasons Monterrey has kind of flown under the radar, because like we talked about with Cruz Azul and with America, they seem like they're further down the table than they might really be because they have played one game less than everybody else. So I think for offensively speaking, it's him for me. On defense, I'm a huge fan. I've got such high expectations for the goalkeeper for Santos Laguna.
Oh yeah, I've seen him too. I forgot his name, but I forgot his name, but the few games I have seen, he's been fantastic. Yeah,
Carlos Acevedo,
24 years old, right?
I think so. I think he's young. He's in his mid 20s.
Yeah, he's very good. I've seen him as well.
Yeah, I mean, Santos has been good, but they haven't been as good as they usually have. But he has kept them in a lot of games and has won points for them. So I am really, really high on him. I mean, and he seems like he gets better every single game, which he's already started out with a high level, and he just keeps getting better and better. So I'm super high on him, and of course Funes Mori.
Yeah, Funes Mori has been an established player for years. I'm surprised he's still doing the deeds, but he's working. So the one player who seems to be the superior this season is Andre Pierre Gignac, and let's talk about him before we end this. He did very well in the Apertura, as you can see, but in the Clausura he's not in the top 10 scorers. So what can you say about that? I've only seen Tigres a few times this season, and I always try to pay attention to Carlos Gonzalez, who was one of my favorite players last season. But what can you say about Gignac?
I think it's not so much Gignac that's really. I don't think he's having any worse of a season. I mean, obviously the goals aren't there. I'm trying to figure out how I'm trying to say this. So I think a lot of his issue is that the supporting cast has really let him down a lot this year. In prior seasons, the supporting cast there at Tigres was phenomenal, and that's why they were able to, go as far as they did domestically in the Club World Cup. But I think a lot of that has kind of weighed on the supporting cast, and to him too, to some extent. But I think that's really the issue. I think this offseason, if he can kind of rest and relax, and maybe Tigres brings in a couple of players to kind of fill in some holes, I would not be surprised to see him kind of, next season back up in the top 10 like he has been for forever, it seems like.
For sure. Anyways, we're out of time, so we're going to end this here. Eugene Lupinski, what is your Twitter handle so people can follow you?
Sure, it's Golazo del Gringo.
All right, so thank you for coming on, and we'll move on to the next segment. And now we are on to the Uruguay section. The Uruguayan League has not started yet. In fact, it just ended. It was the latest South American league to end, if you could believe that. A bit of a complicated format, and yeah, we have Tom Rubble here from who does a lot of Argentinian football, but he also knows a fair amount of Uruguayan football. So figured he was a very fair candidate. How are you, Tom?
I'm very good, thanks, Brian. Yeah, looking forward to discussing Uruguayan football. I think it's one of those leagues that isn't maybe quite as focused on by a lot of media outside of South America, but there's lots of interesting stories and good young players.
Okay, now I gotta admit, for most of this podcast so far, well, first of all, we were recording on April 15th, this one. I have to mention that every single episode or every single country we've done, because in case this is uploaded next week, in case it's uploaded in a month, which I hope it won't be a month, I gotta mention this is as of April 15th. So some of this stuff may be out of date depending on when this is uploaded. But anyways, as with the other countries, I knew a bit about most of them. I knew about all of them except Paraguay and Brazil. But Uruguay is another one where I've not seen almost anything. So I'm going to have to rely on Tom to help me here. Now, from my understanding, I think Nacional are the favorites here, like they usually are. Peñarol, I'm not sure. They weren't very good last season, as it appears. They didn't even qualify for the Libertadores. That might be the first time in a very long time. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, the Uruguayan league seems to have changed a bit of. It seems to become more diverse. Like even in the Sudamericana, I've noticed some of the equipos de barrio, I guess you could call it, have improved. Like I've seen some of them in Sudamericana, and they're pretty good. They're not horrible. They're better in Paraguay's mid-table for sure. So who do you think are the favorites, Tom? Yeah, who do you think are the favorites? I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's obviously usually between the big two, Nacional and Peñarol. Nacional have been by far and away the most consistent over the last year, 2 years, and they were comfortably the sort of best overall team, even though they didn't win either of the Apertura or Clausura last year. And they've got the new man in charge is the guy who took Rentistas, a tiny club, to their first ever title last year, who's more focused on maybe an attacking, better visually kind of style of football compared to what we're maybe used to see from Nacional certainly in the Libertadores. They can often be quite organised and defensive, but they've got a really good young core of players, a lot of whom who won the 2018 Sub-20 Libertadores, so they've got one of the youngest squads they've had in a long time, and a lot of good young players there, and obviously looking for another push to try and qualify for the knockout stage of the Libertadores. So Nacional have to be by far and away the favourites for the tournament, but Peñarol are always going to be right up there, and they've not been great for a while, but they do have some good young players coming through. Certainly Facundo Torres is a really good player, really exciting kind of left-sided forward who likes to drift inside, and they've got a good young centre forward, Agustin Alvarez, who's known as El Canario, and he's got, I think, 10 goals in his last 24 games. He's just 19 years old, and he's definitely one to watch as well. So there's some good players, as well as having Nicolas Chiapacase, who broke through when he was like 16 at River Plate.
And stagnated from there, basically.
Yeah, he's not done anything in the last 6 years, but he's still only 22, so he's not too old just yet, and he'll be looking to reignite his career.
Yeah, it could be a late bloomer for sure. Anyone else? Any dark horses you see here in this league, or do you think it's just going to be between those two?
Well, I think we've seen in the past couple of tournaments, because it's two short tournaments for the most part, as well as a sort of intermediate cup as well. We've seen much smaller clubs triumph recently. So Liverpool won the Clausura, really, really exciting team. Again, full of youngsters. I think probably one of the youngest average ages probably in the entire continent. Lots of guys who are under 23, 24, some really exciting young players for any budding scouts out there to have a look at. So they're going to be right up there because they're in great form. And also I think another dark horse who have been doing pretty well since they've been promoted is and they've obviously got the backing of the City group is Montevideo City Torque. So probably maybe not to everyone's liking the way that they've kind of risen through the ranks and their support from the City group, but they're sort of creating an identity and they're doing things on the football side of things at least intelligently, and they're sort of one of these upwardly mobile clubs. So I think they're two that are going to be very interesting ones to watch again.
Yeah, I saw a bit of Liverpool last year, not in the league, of course, because I said I've seen none of the league, but I saw them in Sudamericana and Libertadores this year. Sudamericana last year, I saw them the 2 games against Huancayo, and I thought they were pretty good. I thought that game could have gone either way, to be honest. Huancayo ended up winning it, but could have definitely gone either way. I think the experience won it on that day. But I also saw them against Católica, and you know what? I think they could have won that if they had a little more cold blood, because they missed a bunch of very, very good chances when they could take the lead, especially in Quito. They had the one chance where the keeper messed up and they couldn't bag it. They couldn't bag it at the back of the net. So another side I liked last year was Phoenix, though. I think they look to have gone worse this year. They're not in the Sudamericana. They don't have Ugarte anymore. But Phoenix. I'll be keen to see how they do, because I liked them a lot last year when I saw them in the Sudamericana.
Yeah. Sure thing. Yeah, no, I mean, they have got some good young players in there. Obviously, Ugarte is a big miss, but Pereira is a very exciting winger. Agustin Conovio is a former under-20 international, and Kevin Alanis is just 18 and quite a good player. Also, Rodrigo Amaral has turned up there, and he's one of my favourites, even though he's not lived up to his potential. But he's one that I'm hoping will finally come good, although my hopes are diminishing with every year that passes.
All right, now let's talk about the relegation. I believe 3 go down this year, and we had a bit of a 2-shock relegation last year. Defensor Sporting and Danubio both went down. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And I guess while we're at it, since we're short on time, just give us some of who do you think is going to get relegated this season?
Yeah, so it was an absolutely huge relegation with not only Danubio and Defensor Sporting, but Cerro as well, who have been a club that have also been one of the most historic names in Uruguayan football. 3 really big names going down to the 2nd division. So the 2nd division is going to be one to really interesting, as well as Forlan managing at Atenas down there as well. But in terms of why they've gone down, Defensor Sporting, I think, moved away guided over the last few years. They're such a good side for bringing through young players, but they kind of went for bigger names and more older, more experienced players, and that really didn't work for them. So I think if they go back to their founding roots, then they should be okay. Danubio haven't been great for a while, but again, I think they've got the young players to help them bounce back quite quickly. So yeah, big shame that neither of those will be in the top flight. But I think if we're looking at teams that are going to struggle, I think one side who could be an interesting one to follow are Rentistas. Even though they've had this amazing roller coaster that have seen them get to the Libertadores, they've lost so many of their players. It's almost like a whole new squad. Their new manager is, I think, only 29 and his first, senior team job. And I think they're just a complete question mark, really. They finished bottom of the Clausura with only 10 points from 15 games. And they've lost, again, some of their best players. So I think they could struggle if they've got to compete on 2 fronts. So they're going to be one to watch. And then automatically, you're probably looking at some of the newly promoted sides as well there. So Cerrito, Villa Española and Juventud have come. Sudamérica have come up there, and I think they're all going to be. They're going to find it tough to cement themselves, because I'd say the clubs that are in the Primera right now, even the ones who didn't necessarily do great in the Clausura, like Wanderers or Progreso, Deportivo Maldonado, they've all kind of got things going for them, and I think it's going to be certainly those sort of newly promoted sides who've got a real battle to stay up.
All right, now that we got that, let's talk about some of the players. You've kind of briefly mentioned a few, especially at Peñarol. What players do you expect to break out? What players do you expect, if there's any established ones, what players do you expect to impress again and whatnot? And what do you think? There's a few players I recognize in Uruguay, especially at Cerro Largo. I recognize Enzo Borges, who was a great Peruvian second division striker, but they signed for the Libertadores, which I found funny. But apparently he's not doing too badly. But what players do you think are going to do well here?
Yeah, so I mean, if we kind of look at the main contenders, then at Nacional, then it's going to be really interesting to see how Andres D'Alessandro comes in and does. I mean, he'll probably be a bit part player, but he's still got the class, and even if he is a bit older, he's going to bring some good experience to that younger side. Bergesio, he might be 36, but he's absolutely lethal at this level still. So they're right at the end of their careers, but they're very, very good. And the last one I'll mention for Nacional is Brian Ocampo. He's a 21-year-old right winger, attacking player who's been in absolutely sensational form so far this year. I think he's got 11 assists in 18 games, and he's really kind of coming through on the talent that we've known that he's had for some time. So Nacional, they're some of the key players to watch, as well as some of the young players on their books as well. In terms of other guys who are some of the best in the division, then you've got to look at Ignacio Ramirez at Liverpool. El Colo has scored loads of goals. He's 24. I'm surprised he's not got a move elsewhere. And one player who's actually traded Liverpool for Nacional is Camilo Candido, the left back, who was one of the best players in the Clausura, 25-year-old left back who's really creative, presence going forward, great dribbler, very good defensively as well. So there are a few of the players that I like. Obviously, Matias Arrezo, the young River Plate striker, is my favourite player in the division, and he's absolutely fantastic. I think he is genuinely an elite level talent. So he's someone who I'm sure lots of people will be familiar with, but they should definitely keep an eye out for. And I've already mentioned really some of the other main players there from Peñarol. So I would say if you want to have a look at some of the other players, I did a piece for the World Football Index on 10 breakout talents from the Clausura, which is probably a good place to have a read a bit more of some of those young players coming through.
All right, cool. So thanks to Tom Rubble for the discussion. Why don't you leave your Twitter handle so people can follow you?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter at TomRobbo89. Lots of Argentinian, Uruguayan, and general South American football, as well as a bit of Aston Villa on there as well.
Sweet. Okay, so we move on to the next section now. And now, one of our last sections, we have Venezuela, along with, I think your name is Jordan. I'm not sure, but you're Red Wine at Arepas on Twitter. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Good. Okay, so your name is Jordan, right?
Yeah, it is.
So I know what to refer to you as. Okay, so we're going to talk about Venezuela now. We're going to do the same format as always, although Venezuela looks to have a different format this year. I'm guessing this is because of COVID, is that right? Is that why they're split the groups?
Yeah, exactly that. So there was a new format last season because of COVID, and there's yet another new format on top of that this year, again because of COVID. So last year, it ended up being a 2-group format with half the league situated in Barinas and half the league situated in Carabobo, 2 Venezuelan states.
Yeah.
This year, there's going to be 3 groups of 7 teams, not geographically located in terms of being headquartered, but each group is done by teams within the geographical vicinity of one another.
All right, cool. Now let's start off by talking about some of the favorites. So, I like with Uruguay, which I just did right now with Tom. I don't know much about the Venezuelan league. It's one of the few. It's part of the league I recognize the least, along with. No, actually, I think I recognize it less than Bolivia, to be honest. So, who are some of the favorites? I'm going to hazard a guess and say Caracas as usual. Although I looked when I saw Caracas in the Libertadores, they did look weaker than previous years I've seen them. Like, I'm not too convinced with some of their forwards. That Quinola, I'm really not a big fan. But yeah, and apparently Anderson Contreras left them, which was a blow for them. But I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, so the thing with Caracas FC this season is they lost some key men. In Robert Hernandez went to Always Ready in Bolivia. Their captain. Bernardo Añor left during the virus pandemic. And they'd already lost players like Rupert Quijada, who was on loan last season at Alianza Lima in Paraguay and hasn't returned, and Alain Baroja, the goalkeeper, who's in Ecuador with Delfin. So since they won the league in 2019, they've lost some key men, Ricardo Andruetti as well, who's 33. His contract wasn't renewed. And those key men haven't been replaced with players of the same caliber. They've been replaced with promising young players. So they've brought in 3 Africans. A player called Kweku Osibonsu, a Ghanaian, came in at the end of 2019 ahead of the 2020 season. And then this pre-season, he's been joined by Samuel Akinula, who is a Benin and Nigerian national, and another player called Adi Oguns, who's a Nigerian. So Caracas look different this season, but they have still No San Vicente, a very accomplished coach who's going to have a very well-drilled team. Unfortunately, they're already out of Copa Libertadores, but given the condensity of the season this year, that might serve in their favour, because last year we saw Caracas and Estudiantes de Merida really have to work hard to balance the league and the Copa Libertadores in October and November when, the whole world were playing catch-up with COVID. Anderson Contreras is out injured with an ACL injury, so he's going to.
I thought he had left. My bad.
No, it's just it's a long-term injury, so he practically missed the whole season, and it's the same injury for Sal Gararapa, the 18-year-old striker that was really starting to impress towards the end of the year. Away from Caracas FC, I'd say some of the favourites this year are going to be Deportivo La Guaira, the 2020 champions. Deportivo Táchira, who are also in the group stages of Copa Libertadores this season.
Yeah.
Maybe there could be a surprise from one of the outsiders. Estudiantes de Merida, although they've won league titles before, they were the 2019 Apertura champions. They weren't on the pace last season, but a lot because of Libertadores. This season, they're under new management. They brought in some good signings, particularly the signing of Alvaro Pereira, the former Uruguayan international, has really stood out. Of course, he's now old. He's 35 years old. But to Liga Futbol to have a World Cup participant and a Copa America winner amongst their ranks is impressive. It's something that's gained a lot of attention. So I think it's going to be one of those 4. There is the potential for an upset because of the format. I'd point to Aragua or Metropolitanos as the rank outsiders. They've got young coaches, very good young coaches. Metropolitanos under Jose Maria Moore and Aragua under Quique Garcia are both at the group stages of the Sudamericana, and I'm expecting a few upsets.
All right. Now, it seems like there's going to be 3 relegations this season. Do you have anyone as one of some of the favorites to get relegated? Who looks the weakest squads here?
So, in one of the groups, there's Lala FC. That's been a really interesting and difficult case over the past throughout 2020 in the past 12 months. They didn't participate in the 2020 league when it restarted under the new format. The league allowed teams to choose whether they were going to participate because of COVID without repercussion. So Lala didn't play, and there were also some serious issues with debt. And it looked like they were going to be under a new name change to Bolivar Sports Club. But in the past couple of days, that Bolivar Sports Club institution have announced that they're going to be playing in the 2nd division, and Lala still look like they're going to be in the 1st division. They barely done anything in terms of signings. Their social media presence has been minimal. No one's really knowing what's been going on. So they're in a tough group with Caracas, Mineros, Monagas, Atletico Venezuela, UCV, and Metropolitanos. UCV in that same group is going to be interesting because they got promoted from the 2nd division. So immediately people will look to see whether they're strong enough to stay up. And they've made a lot of transfers. A lot of new players have come in. Some of those transfers have been really smart, astute signings, some current under-20 internationals, some players with some good caliber. But overall, their team is going to be a bit of an unknown for the top division. So them and Lala will probably scrap it out at the bottom of their group. In the other groups, in Group B, that group has La Guaira, last year's champions, and towards the bottom, it's difficult because Gran Valencia were new to the top flight last season, and they didn't particularly impress. And they've lost some key men. They've lost Hector Acosta, their centre back, who's gone to UCV, and they lost Bicicleta Infante, their captain, their number 10, who's gone to Atletico Venezuela. So I think Gran Valencia have the potential to be in trouble this season. The rest of the group are pretty strong, with the exception of Carabobo. Carabobo, they didn't pick up a single point in 2020 when the season restarted. They played 14 games and they lost 14 games. So that's going to be... a lot of people are going to look to them as massive weak underdogs. But, the season before 2019, they were right up the top. It was a real anomaly of a season, so there's nothing to say it would necessarily repeat itself. And a lot of the players that were involved last season have moved on, and there's a lot of new blood. In Group A, I think if you're going to look at who's going to finish bottom, it's probably Trujillanos, almost certainly. They might not even make it through the season. They've lost all their key players. Juan Tony Carmona, their 19-year-old under-20 international, is currently negotiating with big clubs in Brazil and MLS. He's almost certainly not going to be sticking around. They've already lost Jose Chavez Hernandez to Envigado in Colombia. And their striker from last season, Ronnie Mesa, has already gone to the Canadian Premier League. So they're weak, and if they manage to even participate, it's going to be with a very young squad, a very inexperienced squad, and they're in a group with strong teams in Deportivo Táchira and Estudiantes de Merida and Zamora FC, who had a poor season last year. But then Portuguesa are very capable. They had a poor 2020, but they've made a lot of signings, and they've got a good coach in Jose Alicanas.
All right, now before we end this, I want to ask the last question here, which you mentioned not even briefly. You mentioned it quite well. Who's going to stand out? But can you go a little more in depth? What players you think are going to impress this season, whether it's established or revelations?
Yeah, so I think I'm really looking forward to seeing Freddy Gondola. He's a Panamanian left winger, 25 years old. He did really well at Yaracoyanos last season. They were new to the top flight, and they shocked everyone in really keeping pace until the final couple of games. At one point, they were rank outsiders for Copa Libertadores qualification, and France Football got in contact because they were going to cover it because it was going to be like an incredible story. And unfortunately, they fell away and ended up missing out even on South America qualification. And Freddy Gondola was key to that. He's gone to Deportivo Táchira, who were in the group stages of Libertadores. They were last season runners-up. And he was their top scorer in pre-season. So I'm really excited to see Freddy Gondola this season. Elsewhere, Deportivo La Guaira have some great young players. John Aramburu, who is a right and left back, 18 years old, is a very exciting player. He's got a Spanish passport, and he's signed to the Anton Griezmann agency, Bayern 4. So I think this could be his last season in Venezuelan football. I wouldn't be surprised to see him move to Europe. And if I gave you a third name for somebody that I'm really excited about seeing this season, I'd probably go. Maybe it's a difficult one to pick out one player, but I'm excited to see what can be achieved at Metropolitanos this season. Like I said earlier, Jose Maria Moore is a very, very good coach, very organised coach, and they've got a raft of young players who I think are good enough to make the leap to Europe or a top club in South America. Andres Ferro, centre-back, 19 years old. Abraham Bahaji, a 6'4" central midfielder with a Spanish passport. And Christian La Rotonda, a defensive midfielder, again with a Spanish passport, who scored their first ever goal in the Copa Sudamericana a couple of weeks ago. So Metropolitano will be a really interesting team this season with like 3 or 4 very interesting young players.
All right, so that's going to do it for this Venezuela section. This is actually went quicker than I expected and more smoothly. So thanks to Jordan, I keep forgetting your name. What is your Twitter handle so people can follow you?
So my Twitter handle is Red Wine and Arepas, and I also run Futve English. which is a Venezuelan language, an English language account dedicated to Venezuelan football.
All right, so thank you. So we go on to the next section. And we're almost done here on this podcast. We have 3 more countries to go. We have Ecuador, Bolivia, and Chile. And the next one we're going to do is Ecuador because we have someone. Well, I'll explain what we're going to do with Bolivia, Chile later because we have someone. We don't have people for them. I have someone else, and I'm going to have to research those. But anyways, we are here with Martin, who runs Warriors of Ecuador on Twitter. How are you?
Hey, how are you? I'm doing good. Thank you for having me on as a guest.
No problem. And this is recorded on April 15th. And remember, just a reminder that if this is uploaded a month from now, hopefully not, this is all recorded as of this date. So, yeah, let's talk about the leagues. It looks like the usual suspects are up there. But Independiente del Valle do have a game in hand. I want to ask quickly, before we talk about some of the favorites, is this Independiente del Valle's year to finally live up to that sign they had in their old stadium, Futuro Campeón de Ecuador?
That's a good question. Independiente del Valle have a really strong team this year. It's looking kind of hard to name them champions of Ecuador because we have some top teams in the league. They're currently in 5th place right now, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I definitely think they're in the top 3 favorites to win the league, and yeah.
Okay, so that's interesting to hear about Independiente del Valle. I see Mushuk Runa are up there. Are they overachieving, or do they have a generally good squad this year?
No, I like the Mushugruna team, the squad they have this year for the 2021 season. Many would think they're overachieving. Yeah, I would say so as well since they're sitting in 3rd place in the league. But I was looking at them top 8, top 6 maybe. They're doing really good this year. They have some great players, a new squad. I like it.
Okay, so why don't you tell me about some of the favorites this season for the Ecuadorian League? So Barcelona are first, Emelec are second. Those are the traditional giants. But is there any? What can you tell me about those? I have an Emelec fan as a friend who tells me they haven't been all that convincing, but they should still be favorites, I would imagine. What would you say? Well, who are the favorites this season?
Yeah, Emelec is definitely a favorite. They're also playing Sudamericana, so they're playing 2 tournaments at once, and they're still in 2nd place. So yeah, Emelec's definitely one of them. Barcelona Sporting Club, also the reigning champions of last year. They're in 1st place right now on the table. We have Mushugruna in 3rd. I don't think they will stay in 3rd for that long. We'll see. 4th place, we have LDU Quito, Liga Deportiva Universitaria. They were in the final last year in Ecuador, the top 2 teams. So they're definitely, I would say, in there. Right now, in 5th place, we have Independiente del Valle. I think they're definitely a top 4, top 3 worthy team. Macará, Deportivo Cuenca, Delfín, Universidad Católica, I like. They're definitely trying to get into that top 6 spot. But, yeah, those are the top teams in Ecuador right now.
All right, now let's talk about some of the relegation candidates here. I know nothing about Ecuador's relegation. I've heard some awful stuff from Olmeda's ownership, but barring that, I don't really know much. What can you tell me about the relegation? And well, you could explain the Olmeda situation if you know about it as well.
Yeah, so basically, the Ecuador format, first of all, is 16 teams, and there's 2 different phases. The winner of the first phase automatically gets to the final of the Ecuador League that season. And then the second phase, if you win that league, you're also in the final. But anyways, there's always 2 teams getting relegated every year. So Olmedo is sitting at 16th place, and Orense is also in 15th. They're looking at relegation right now. Olmedo was unlucky because the first match week of the Liga Pro Ecuador, they had to forfeit because they weren't registered. Their players weren't registered, and some of jugadores, and so they got a easy loss right there. They're in last place. I feel bad for them. They have good names, good up and coming stars, but yeah.
And so you think the favorites are Orense and Olmedo? That's who you see with the favorites. Isn't there anyone else you would say are down there that you think will be sucked into that battle?
Yeah, Técnico Universitario from Ambato, they're currently in 12th place, which isn't, like, they're safe right now, but I think they will drop. They lost some of their best players last season. They're doing okay right now, but I can see them dropping, and Orense and Olmedo could maybe get saved. Also, 9 de Octubre, I don't know. They're currently in 8th, but I think, I don't know. They're kind of tricky. Also, Manta is in 13th right now. They could drop as well. Guayaquil City's in 14th, but I can see them getting saved. Guayaquil City has a good squad, good players, good coach.
All right, now we this is going a little faster than expected, but we still have some time. Let's talk about some of the players here now. As I understood, Facundo Barceló is one of the better players in the league for Emelec. He's been there last year as well, even in their poor campaign. Why don't you tell us some of the standouts for a bunch of the teams, particularly the ones you think are favorites, and some revelations as well.
Yeah, so I'll name basically the best players from the top 6. So Barcelona, number 1. I think their best player is Javier Buray, an Argentinian goalkeeper.
Not Damian Diaz.
I would say he's second best.
Interesting.
Damian Diaz, Argentinian, nationalized Ecuadorian. He's lethal in the Barcelona squad. And I also like Byron Castillo, an Ecuadorian right back. Right winger.
I have heard, yes.
For Emelec, Facundo Barceló, without a doubt, the Uruguay striker. He's currently the second top goal scorer in the league. Lethal for Emelec. I also like Angel Gracia, an Ecuadorian left back. He registers 4 assists. The top assister actually in the league. No, second top. And then for Liga de Quito, Cristian Martinez Borja, a Colombian striker. He's doing good. Second top scorer in the league. Independiente del Valle, Brian Montenegro, 5 goals in the league. Second, tied with Cristian Martinez Borja. Also, the Argentinian Cristian Ortiz.
Yeah,
he's having a fantastic year.
He used to play in Peru as well, so I know him quite well.
Yes, he's registering 3 assists in the league right now and just basically qualified Independiente to the Copa Libertadores versus Gremio.
Which I find amazing because he was pretty average in Peru, to be honest. So
wow,
it's incredible. And the Ecuadorian league is a much higher quality league, so I'm a little bit surprised at that. Independiente has definitely gotten the best of him.
Yes, I agree. And then for Macará, a 6th place team, John Santa Cruz, he's an Ecuadorian, doing really well as striker for Macará. And Aaron Rodriguez, he's a 21-year-old winger for Macará, Ecuadorian, doing fantastic.
All right, so thank you, Martina. Before we end this little section, where can people follow you on Twitter? What is your Twitter handle?
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's at Ecuador Heroes on Twitter and Instagram. So you could find it on Warriors of Ecuador.
All right, cool. So with that, we go on to the next section. Okay, now we have the last section here, which is going to be Chile and Bolivia. Now, I had a guest for Chile who unfortunately didn't decided not to be on this podcast. But I asked him. His name is Adam Brandon. If you follow Chilean football in English, probably know who he is. I asked him anyways if he could at least make up with it with letting me know how the Chilean league is going. So I'm going to quickly read it out. I'm gonna try and make this 5 minutes each. And same with Bolivia. I didn't get anyone with Bolivia, so I'm gonna have to do a bit of guessing with that one. So. Yeah, I'm just going to read the table and how it's going. Now, with Chile, first in the table is Universidad Católica and second, Unión La Calera, who both are in the Libertadores group stages this year. Third place is Audax Italiano, and in the Sudamericana spots, there's O'Higgins, Huachipato, Everton, and Deportes La Serena. As for the relegation, right now in the relegation spots is Unión Española, UD Chile, and Santiago Wanderers. Keep in mind it's very early in the league. It's only 4 matches in. Some teams haven't even played 4 matches yet. Some have actually only played 3 matches. But to sum this up, let's talk about some of the teams. According to Adam, Católica are still the big favorites, and they don't have much competition. But apparently Poyet isn't doing the best job of them. So there's always room for shocks. Right now they're first. They've won 3 games and lost 1. But it seems that it really seems that they are going to be the favorites here, and it could be difficult to see them lose the league again. That's what he told me. And Unión La Calera, without impressing much, according to him, is chugging on nicely. Now, as for the stand-up players, according to him, he is telling me that Chilean youth players have been neglected over the past few years, and I can testify to that because I have seen some of the Chilean league the past few years, and I've also heard a few facts about the minutes that Chileans were getting, the young Chileans were getting, and it is pitiful. But apparently, a few under 23 players have come out, have been revelations. Not so much revelations, but they've started to play a little bit more. And apparently, the league quality has improved. And you could tell just last year how Chileans did well in the Sudamericana. Not so much the Libertadores, but Coquimbo reached the semifinal of the Sudamericana. Católica, I think, reached the quarterfinal. I don't remember if it was quarter or semis. Unión La Calera reached the round of 16. So that was a better showing from Chilean clubs than most years. As for the standouts here, he told me that Thomas Alarcón at O'Higgins, Tapia at Universidad Católica, and I've seen Tapia. He's a wonderful player. Saw him in the under-17s. Daniel Gonzalez at Wanderers. There's Luis Jimenez at Palestino, Eduard Bello at Antofagasta, Juan Cuevas at Everton, and Sampedri at Universidad Católica. Sampedri is one that most of us Libertadores followers have heard of because he used to play for Tucumán. Now, as for the relegation, apparently Santiago Wanderers are probably not going to be down there for long because they have a young but exciting looking team. And it appears they were unlucky to lose both games as of date. He seems to pin the relegation favorites to Melipilla, La Serena, and maybe Antofagasta and Ñublense, and Curicó as well, or Curicó, I think that's how it's pronounced. So yeah, that's about it for Chile. It was a little bit harder, but like I said, I'm not an expert on this. I'm only reading what he said. So yeah, we're gonna go on to Bolivia now. Alright, so we're back and now we're here with Bolivia. Now, looking at the standings, I'm only going to read the standings for Bolivia because I could not get much information about it. It was difficult, trust me. At least with Chile, I had Adam on my side to help me. But with Bolivia, I don't really have anyone. I'm kind of relying on myself and I'm just struggling a little bit. But for the sake of completion, I do feel like I have to include them in Chile. So apologies if that's not exactly what you wanted to hear. I just needed to make sure they were in it just for the sake of completion, and I'm a completionist, so it needed to be all in this. So if you're from these countries and you speak English or you can understand English, I'm sorry this is not what you wanted to hear, but this is the best I could do. Royal Padi are first with 12 points. They won all 4 games. The strongest second, and Atletico Palmaflor and Bolívar are third and fourth respectively, both with 9 points. The Sudamericana spot, there is Always Ready, Nacional Potosí, Real Tomayapo, I think that's how it's pronounced, and Guavirá. In the relegation spot, there's San Jose, who have negative 3 points. They were deducted 3 points as punishment for failing to pay an outstanding debt with former player Carlos Salcedo, according to Wikipedia here. That's what it says, and I am reading Wikipedia because that's all the information is crammed into one. But San Jose, Carlos Salcedo used to be that really good Bolivian player. I think like 2013, he had like 45 goals, which was one of the highest in the world at the time. I think only Messi and Ronaldo had more goals in the entire world at that time. So Carlos Salcedo, I can imagine, he definitely wanted his pay. He's a very professional footballer, from my experiences anyways. And I suspect, you know what, I'm not going to guess much. I don't want to guess and get it just completely wrong. But yeah, that's how the table's going right now. Wilstermann's also down at the bottom, as is Oriente Petrolero, Aurora, and Blooming. But it's very early in the season, so it's hard to say who will fight relegation or not. I definitely can't confirm that. The top scorer right now is Carlos Melgar, who I think is a young player. If I remember correctly, he's 1994. I'm thinking of another Melgar. This is a Melgar who played in the under-17s a few years ago. There's Carmelo Algarañaz, Osvaldo Blanco, the Colombian, Ronald Cuellar, and Jefferson Tavares, the Brazilian, all with 3 goals. But Carlos Melgar is the top scorer. So yeah, again, if you're Bolivian or Chilean, apologies if this is not what you wanted to hear, but I honestly couldn't find anyone to record these little bits. So I just have to include these. So I'm gonna include Adam's Twitter handle just anyways because he helped me with this. His Twitter handle is at AdamBrandon84. And my Twitter handle, for those who want to follow me, because I didn't mention it, is I might have mentioned the Peru section, but I'll mention it again. It's Brian Bertie 1998. So yeah, it's Bertie TIE at the end. So yeah, thank you for listening to this podcast. I hope you all enjoyed it. It was quite an ambitious project of mine, and yeah, we will. I hope to be back in a few months' time to do this again, and maybe I'll turn this into a Libertadores podcast. We'll see. So yeah, thank you for listening, and we're signing off. Cheers.